less than 3 hours to go in the 65th total 24 hours of Spa. We now effectively have just another Blancpain Endurance Series race duration to go as the clock counts down to the end of what has been a dramatic race, an interesting race, and one that looks now somewhat different from the order that we had yesterday, where the grid was formed with 65 starters in the bright sunshine ready to get things underway. Red Foo was here looking at the cars in anticipation of his concert in the evening, and the drivers sweltering in the cars were keen to get on with the work. For Marc VDS Racing, an important race, this Belgian team on home soil. Stefan Mucker was the man on pole position though for Aston Martin, alongside him Alessandro Pietruidi, who very nearly caused mayhem at the first corner. Watch the black and white Porsche of Nick Tandy. How he missed the Ferrari is still something of a mystery. There were good battles right the way up and down the order in the early stages. Alvaro Perret taking on Maximilian Goetz, for example, was one of them. Those two battling together as they came across the timing line. But we lost Alex Buncombe early on when a suspension breakage put him off into the barriers, and lucky photographers were showered with debris. They were all okay, so too had in the race, and that bunched everybody up as they worked their way behind the safety car. They were released, but not for long, as Jos Menton had a big accident coming out of Eau Rouge. He crashed at the top of Radion. He was okay, but the Blancpain Racing Lamborghini would go no further. There were dramas for Hexis Racing as well. An overheating McLaren limping into what looked like retirement. Well, as Mark van der Strassen gave a thumbs up from his pit box and Maxime Martin headed for the pit lane, the McLaren limped on, but not for too much longer. Marc VDS looked very strong in the early stages. Martin had a brief spell in the lead. Nick Katzberg monstered Stefan Mucker and put that car up front as well. And as he handed it over to Henri Moser and then to Marcus Pautala, the number 4 BMW showing an increased turn of pace that sometimes you don't expect from the car. Often you just think number 3 is going to be the one to beat out of that team. But after an early stop to get out of sequence and to take on fuel behind the first safety car, number 84 Mercedes had got itself into the mix as well. As the pit stop cycles unwound, it would rise and fall accordingly. But the with Bas Linders at the wheel was pushing on. So too was the Manthey Porsche, and that was edged onto the grass by Frank Stifler. But Richard Lietz kept his foot nailed to the boards and surged away past. The Porsche then had to work its way not just through back markers but also the leading pack of cars. He sorted out Henri Moser, and Marc VDS Racing lost Jens Klingmann's car. Engine failure putting that out of the race. Thankfully, he was just avoided by the SMP Racing Ferrari. Marco Schelp's race didn't go much further. He got Wendlingered. Carl muscled him out of the way, and as the Porsche charged the concrete, the repair bill came as soon as the retirement form. The move of the race, though, round the outside at Les Combes, and that was Patrick Pilet to take the race lead. He got past back markers and Jelmer Berman all in one go, and it put the Manthey Porsche up front. Berman headed for the pit lane. The Porsche was able to try to build up a gap, but in this cat and mouse battle they were having in the early evening, as one pitted, so the other took the lead, and it was a real question as to who would come out on top at that round of pit stops. Mark Lieb took over the Porsche. Jelmer Berman was able to get himself ahead as he swung out of La Source and plunged downhill. The BMW went back ahead, but not for long. The long pit exit for the Porsche meant that it was a while before Lieb was back on track and able to go after the Belgian team BMW. Once he did so, he was able to bring down the gap, and with good use of the traffic, he boxed in Berman. He went for the inside line of Pau, and that put the Porsche back ahead of the BMW Z4. As the sun set, the headlights were switched on in earnest, and the battles continued all the way through the field. We still had this battle up front between Porsche, BMW and the Mercedes that was very much becoming a dark horse and a big threat to the leaders. The team's also concerned about where the cars would be at the 6-hour mark, because half points awarded in the championship there. The same also true at the 12-hour mark. And at the end of 6 hours, it was BMW number 4 that bagged the 12 points in the Pro Cup for leading the way. The firework display started early as Johnny Adam brought the Beech Dean Aston into the pit lane. Sparks showering from underneath the car. It was able to rejoin, but Spa looked fabulous as the darkness descended and the cars battled on into the night. For the drivers, they had had a hot afternoon and a long night was ahead. They didn't really have time to appreciate the fireworks, nor the concert, nor the dancing, nor the bar, nor the various restaurants around the circuit. They had to carry on with the job in hand. For others, though, there were plenty of distractions off track. The cars battled on through the night, But inevitably, as dawn broke, quite a few of them had dropped out of contention. During the night, the fans able to keep track of where the cars were with a Lumirank display on the windscreens of the cars to help identify who was where in the race. And going in towards midnight, it was the number 4 BMW that led the way. But as dawn broke, that car was out with electrical dramas. It had affected the alternator of the car, and as the teams tried to catch up on sleep and the barbecues were lit, there was the sad sight of the number 3 Mark VDS Racing Team BMW stranded by the side of the circuit, going no further. 75 Porsche had a punctured tyre. That would limp into the pit lane. More time lost, but it would keep going as the 84 Mercedes became ever more of a threat to this car for the race lead. It was becoming a Mercedes versus Porsche fight. Daniel De Bruer had a big spin in the number 58 Porsche coming out of the so-called speaker's corner, and 2 very brave marshals helping to get that out of harm's way. The car continued, many laps lost, but it's still in the race. For the hard-working mechanics, there were more tyres to change, more driver changes for other teams further down the pit lane as well. The pit lane, barely at any point in the race, a quiet place to be. Dennis Anderson was busy in his Pro-Am Ferrari, hustling on coming out of La Source. And Ferrari fans well catered for, with many Ferrari 458 Italias across all 3 classes in this 4th round of the Blancpain Endurance Series. Still heading the championship in the Pro Cup, the Kessel Racing Ferrari served another pit stop. The combination of Rigon Ramos and Zampieri doing a good job behind the wheel. The lead changed though as the Mercedes muscled its way up alongside the Porsche and zapped past going in towards Eau Rouge. The 2 of them still squabbling over the lead. Other lightweight Mercedes had become so thanks to dropping bodywork around the circuit. McLaren had had a lousy night. Most of them had disappeared from the scene. There were just 2 left, and the Von Ryan racing car of Bruno Senna was tagged into this spin. Thankfully, though, the car wasn't too badly damaged, and Bruno Senna was able to rejoin, albeit with yet more time lost. As the Audi mechanics and team personnel looked on, attention turned to other cars in the race, such as the Pro-Am class Nissan, with Wolfgang Reif at the wheel of it, which suddenly had the Lumirank display drop down from the windscreen. From Pereira's Porsche had a puncture, bodywork damage, tyre off the rim, and for 4th place things changed going down towards La Source, as at the inside of the Stefano Colombo driven BMW went the Kessel Racing Ferrari. Cesar Ramos in a big hurry. The Gulf Racing mechanics had had a pretty long night. They were keen to get some sleep, and after a pit stop for the 84 Mercedes, it came out just behind the Manthey Racing Porsche. Their battle continued, and then the question became who would have to make the last pit stop, because whoever pitted last would ultimately lose the lead and lose the race. The 2 cars ran nose to tail until the Porsche pitted, and Bernd Schneider in the pit lane was getting ready for his next stint. Fans young and old enjoying the spectacle of GT3 cars. Harold Primat not enjoying Les Combes as he spun his Audi, and thankfully all the Ferraris were able to dodge around him. Audi number 2 taken into its garage for a brake pad change. If it's in the garage, more people can work on the car, and the Philippe Marie Ferrari with a puncture. Andre Lotterer rejoined in Audi number 2 and had this uncharacteristic spin going through Les Combes. He did get going, but only after he'd had to reset things, because kangaroo-like, the car didn't seem to want to join in at all. Xavier Marson got himself ready for his next stint, as 53, having recovered from its puncture, then had an engine problem, and that also had to limp around to the pit lane. Plenty of Pirelli P0 tyres have been got through by the teams in the pit lane, and the lead changed back once again as 84 Mercedes made its pit stop. The Porsche back in front once more. But every time it happened, so the Mercedes would catch back up, and Bernd Schneider went round the outside, going into the pit path to take the lead. For a man who's retired, he's going as fast as ever. Then a big accident for Louis Machiels. He spun into Eau Rouge after a tyre went down, and a car that had led the Pro-Am class not many laps before was very definitely out of the race, and a limping Louis walked away. He was okay, but a bit bruised and battered and very disappointed. As the Manthey Racing Porsche got back into the race, it rejoined behind the leading car. It had gone a lap down under the safety car, but that was soon brought back as, unlapping himself, Mark Lee charged through the traffic. The safety car was soon back out once again, however, and the battle continuing between Mercedes and Porsche. As we stand, they are on the lead lap, but number 150 Porsche has also served a drive-through for overtaking under the safety car. But at the end of 495 laps, it is Mercedes from Porsche, third, Ferrari, fourth, Audi, and this is the overall classification that we're looking at. The surviving BMW, only one BMW left, amazingly, runs in fifth place. Sixth is the Audi with Harold Primack, Oliver Jarvis and Christopher Hasse, and seventh overall is where you find the leading Pro-Am car of Matt Griffin, Alex Mortimer, Tony Belander and Duncan Cameron. Gentleman Trophy honours at the moment being headed by the Sofrev Autosport Promotion car number 20, which is Patrice Goëla, along with Fred Bouvy, double winner Jean-Luc Bobelic and Jean-Luc Blanchemin. The Gulf Racing McLaren is down in 18th place, having had a really miserable time of things over the course of the last few hours. And as you go through the results, we started with 65 cars in the race. We've had a number of retirements of late, which takes us down to something like 32 still officially running in the race. But one or two of those are in the pit lane and therefore may not necessarily still be actually in the race. But until they've formally announced to the organisers that a car is retired, it's still shown as being live in the event. Look down through this page, and sad to say we lose a fair few more cars, such as the 127 early hours of the morning. The Pressy Spark Mercedes lost a wheel. The Mark VDS Racing BMW had a fire extinguisher go off, which in turn damaged the electrics. The 107 McLaren had an engine problem. 0 retired with accident damage. 230 Nissan was out. Number 12 McLaren was engine related. Number 4 was electrical. Number 9, what didn't it have, was the answer when I asked one of the team members as to the problems there. Number 25 BMW crashed out. Number 13 retired with accident damage. 43 had a vibration, that retired from the race. The Luca Rangoni BMW. Engine dramas for number 7 McLaren then became damaged. 77 McLaren of Philip Eng was in the gravel. Number 100 had an overheating problem. The Aston Martin of Jamie Campbell-Walter and Darren Turner, and eventually an ignition failure put that out. And with starter relays, crankshafts, then also damage, out went the number 1 Audi of Stefan Ortelli. And the very first car to retire with fuel pressure problems was the DKR Engineering BMW, and ahead of a 24-hour race, that car managed the sum total of just 6 racing laps. So we are into now just over the last 2 3/4 hours of the race. We've got the top 2 pretty much on the same lap. I say that pretty much because the cars are so far apart on the lead lap, it is as good as a lap between them, but there is still some hope for the Manthey Racing Porsche. Jack Nicholls is in the pits for us. This is David Addison, and John Watson is with me, and we've enjoyed a fascinating race. We've had some good racing, we've had some controversy with a lot of penalties being given to people in terms of drive-throughs and stop-and-goes. We've had some impressive moves pulled by drivers. We've had some silly moves as well that we've seen in the race. It's had everything.
Certainly has been a very tough race. In the first 3 to, let's say, 5 hours, it was really the 4 principal German manufacturers going at it hammer and tongs, with BMW leading and Mercedes and Porsche. Audi not able to match the pace of those other 3 manufacturers, but they were getting there bit by bit by bit. But even they themselves had uncharacteristic reliability problems, something you do not expect to hear from Audi. The lead Audi right now is Frank Stippler in 4th place, 6 laps down from the lead car. This is the Mercedes-Benz we're looking at. Maximilian Goetz in that car, and pretty much since the middle of the night, the Mercedes-Benz has taken control, albeit in a great battle with the Porsche 150, driven right now by Richard Leitz, but that car did have to suffer a penalty for overtaking, apparently under the safety car.
Indeed so, and the penalty applied because the overtake had come before the safety car line. Now here's the replay of it. Look top right, you'll see the Porsche. We were impressed by the move at the time. Look at the way that the Porsche swings through the traffic. Now look at the white line there. That is the safety car line, and you can't overtake until you get to that line. So even though the safety car had pulled off, you can't overtake until you get to the line, and that's why 150 got the drive-through penalty.
Well, I mean, that's the rules and regulations are for, and with television all around the racetracks these days, everything is noted in a way it certainly wouldn't have been years ago. And a disappointment because Richard Lee was certainly pushing to try and mitigate the gap between the Porsche and the Mercedes-Benz. In the meantime, back on it, driving as hard as ever as the car goes up through Eau Rouge over Radio, back onto the Kemmel Straight. And this is, for him, the 498th lap he is commencing.
Ben Schneider, who's one of the 3 drivers and number 84, has already won, of course, the Nürburgring and the Dubai 24 Hours this year, the Bathurst 12 Hour as well. which is not bad for a man who has retired from racing. Now, also, in the last few hours, there's not just been that drive-through penalty that's affected the overall classification, but also there was quite a sizable accident that took out number 17 Ferrari and the 16 Audi, Enzo Ede at the wheel. Now, look here, the Audi tries to move back, having lapped the Ferrari and take the line for the corner, and he completely misjudges it, charges the Ferrari off into the barrier, and that, sad to say, is the end of the Ferrari. Ian Dockrell was the man behind the wheel. Now, as he goes down out of the pith path, have a look, the Audi is on the right-hand side, and Enzo Ede goes ahead, but he just seems to misjudge where the Ferrari was as he tried to cut across and take the line for the next corner. Both drivers okay, but John, that a big accident. I mean,
heavy damage to the front of the Audi. Enzo Ede gets out of the car. Ferrari also severe front end damage. I mean, part of the racetrack, you don't ordinarily see cars getting into the barrier, but it's a quick exit, so any contact with the barrier is going to happen at high speed, and Enzo Ede just simply came out of the Fagna sequence of corners and cut across the Ferrari. I think he just simply felt that he had the momentum off the corner. He didn't realise that the Ferrari accelerating hard, which is fully entitled to do, and probably, to be honest, Enzo Ede did not need to move from right to left because of the situation that he was in. He had control of the corner, and he was just being too ambitious and thinking that he was going to get the race line into what is now Campus Corner. A mistake on the part of Enzo Ede, and an expensive one for both the Audi and Ferrari team.
And as the two drivers stood there and looked at each other, both shrugging to say, what did you do that for? Each thinking that it was the other one's fault. The Ferrari driver, Ian Dockrell, thinking that Enzo Ede had carved him up, and the Audi driver, Belgian driver, Enzo Ede, thinking that it was Ian Dockrell that had made contact with him. But from that shot that we had, I'm afraid I would suggest that it was Enzo Ede who was at fault.
Yeah, I mean, when you're overtaking somebody as he was doing, he was the quicker car in terms of lap time, not necessarily in terms of out-and-out speed, but in effect there was no need to come from right across to take the traditional line into Campus Corner. All he had to do was hold station on the inside. He wouldn't have lost any time of any note, but more importantly, there wouldn't have been the contact between the two cars, and it was just a minor misjudgment, but a major consequence to both driver and cars.
Now, what about that safety car line issue? Yes, you're quite right to say rules are rules, but a driver of the experience of Mark Lieb, you'd have thought, would have known exactly where to push. Would that have been his call to go there and then, or would the team have said to him, perhaps over the radio, right, safety car's in, go for it?
The drivers should know the rules. They do know the rules. They know one of the key for a driver in any form of motor race, but particularly in endurance racing, is to be aware of where the lines are that say you must not go before you cross the safety car line. They are deliberately painted around the racetrack because of there being two safety car deployments on this track, because of the length of the track and the number of cars that are taking part in the event. So it really is drummed into the drivers, and I suspect it was just Richard Lieb was too anxious to get on with the programme, seeing that he was caught up in a group of much slower cars, and knowing if he hadn't done what he did, he was going to get caught even more, because then you came through the sequence of Fagna corners, and it could have taken him maybe until he got onto what would be the back straight, the climb up to Blancpain, before he could make progress. And then in the meantime, the Mercedes was going to continue to pull away. So he just was, let me say, anticipated it and paid the price.
Let me offer you a sentence we don't often have in the Spa 24 Hours. The best placed Audi is fourth. They've had 2 wins on the bounce last year and in 2011 as well. But here, they have been struggling all weekend, and the teams have been saying, no, we've been hurt by the balance of performance. I have to say, I didn't really buy into that going into the race. And Stefan Ortelli was a real hero in the first few hours until his car had initially a starter relay problem. Frank Stippler, last year's winner, runs in 4th place in Audi number 2. You think, okay, well, 4th, that's not that bad, but he's 5 laps down on the race-leading car.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that Audi have been able to do, they're running currently in the 2 minutes 25 second range, whereas the Mercedes, the Porsche have been able to run well below that. But right now, the first and second place car is running much the same pace as Frank Stippler, and that particular car has been running with Stippler, Christopher Mies and Andre Lotterer roughly at the same pace from the minute the lights went out to where we are now, with 2 minutes and 40 minutes, 2 hours 40 minutes of this race remaining. So they have been, if nothing, they've been consistent. Now, some might say they haven't been consistently fast, but they've done the best. And the key for Frank Stippler and Mies and Andre Lotterer is that they've maintained a consistent pace. That's all they could do. That's what the team have asked them to do. They're 6 laps down on race leader Maximilian Gott right now. They're 1 lap down in 3rd place of David Rigo in the Ferrari. So while that is probably out of reach in terms of performance, we've still got almost 2.5, just over 2.5 hours of this race remaining. And you know, we saw that incident with Enzo Weed and the Ferrari. Anything like that can happen at any time. It's not, you don't wish it upon a competitor or a car that you're going to try and challenge for a podium with the final podium position, but that's what makes up these long endurance events.
And many of them, of course, have been around the block quite a lot. They know exactly what to do in long-distance races. This is the car now leading Pro-Am, and Mika Salo is the man behind the wheel of it. He drove briefly for Ferrari in Formula 1. He's doing a good job now in lots of different GT categories for Ferrari. Second is Matt Griffin in Pro-Am. We've just had the change, in fact, between them. But third is Peter Pizzera in the Nissan. And don't forget, this is a car which is being driven by all previous winners of the Nissan PlayStation Academy, whether they've won regional elements of it or outright. You've got Lucas Ordóñez, the original winner, Jan Mardenborough, the 2011 winner, Peter Pizzera was the German Academy winner, and Wolfgang Reip was the European Academy winner from last year. So all of these drivers have gone from couch to cockpit, and all 4 mighty impressive. In comes the Nissan. In also comes at the end of 500 laps now, Mark Lieb in the Manthey Porsche.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Nissan are concerned, again, it's been don't try and win the race in the opening laps or the opening hours. And, well, undoing the belts is one thing, loosening them is one thing, but undoing the belt before you come to a stop is a no-no. We saw what happened earlier in the season in Nagaro when Sebastian Loeb, who came into the pits and undid the belts before he came to a standstill. So let's let a look again and just see whether this has been an issue which they will be penalised from. He undoes the shoulder straps to loosen them, but it's undoing the buckle that holds the whole seatbelt assembly together. And has he done that before he's come to a standstill? It's difficult to tell clearly whether... I think did the shoulder straps, you could see they were much looser, which is permissible, but if you undo the buckle itself and then the whole seatbelt is released, that then can be a penalty.
Yeah, the Loeb incident in FIA GT. We've not yet seen Sebastian in Blancpain, which is a shame, but maybe for the Nürburgring, you never know. Tyre change for the 35 Nissan, a team that started with 2 and is down to 1 because, of course, it was the sister car of Alex Buncombe that had that enormous accident in the early stages. That 13 of the race, we lost him, and Alex is okay after that big impact, but that really was something that took away the breath of lots of people. That was a mighty accident.
I mean, you get rattled around in the cockpit when that happens, and it was a heavy impact, particularly on the right-hand side of the car. Fortunately, left-hand drive, so it was effectively the passenger side of the car that had the initial impact. But nevertheless, your neck, your head, your shoulders, your whole body, it's just sort of being hit by Mike Tyson, and you know, it takes time to recover from it.
You speak from experience of being hit by Mike Tyson, do you?
Well, I know a few people that have been.
You get to have that pleasure.
They're still recovering.
Yeah, exactly. While the Porsche's in the pits, it could lose a lap, of course, here, because the Mercedes is pounding round. Bernd Schneider, as we discovered a little while ago, does single stints in this, and that means that Maximilian Goetz has got back in behind the wheel. I think the Porsche's going to be good to go. Yes, it is. It will stay on the same lap then as the Mercedes, as it powers then now out of the pit lane. That's the pit out line, so you can then take your finger off the pit lane speed limit button and blast uphill. But this long pit exit, of course, you don't just feed back in. This element here, as you come back onto the circuit, is in profile a bit similar to how the old bus stop chicane used to be.
Yeah, it is, and it's not as satisfactory. And there's another Porsche pulled off.
That's the Speed Lover 94 Cup Spec car, the car of Rick Renman's former class winner.
Yeah, up at Les Combes, so that car looks like its entire day is... there's got it moving again, he's got it rolling. So he'll do a bit of a U-turn somewhere. Maybe he'll drive against on the sort of the access road. Let's have a look and see. Well, there's contact. That's what happened. The back of the car was tagged
by a Nissan.
Yeah, by the Nissan, and all 4 wheels and tyres locked up. Hits the tyre barrier, bounces off it. That'll be a little trip down into the pit lane to see if there's any damage to any of the structure, particularly the rear wing.
but we've seen that car have a few spins already. We've seen bodywork hanging off it, and it keeps on going. It might be well abused, but it keeps going, that car. It is Wim Mulders, in fact, behind the wheel. It is 34th in the classification. There are two ahead that aren't circulating, so let's call that 32nd, shall we? Still going.
Yeah, but I think one of the keys to the success of manufacturers like Porsche, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, BMW is not only do they make competitive cars, they make cars that the manufacturer knows that in 24-hour races, 6-hour races, 12-hour races, you're liable to have contact of some description at some point. So they're not building the thing down to, if you like, the way a Formula One car is pared right down to the barest minimum. These cars are designed that if there's a bit of bump and grinding going on, they're not going to have to limp back to the pits and say, oh, fix me, please. And that's part of the... I mean, Porsche have been doing this, since the early 50s, and doing it consistently, and most importantly, doing it successfully.
And one of the reasons that you've got this increased Porsche presence here this year is because it is 50 years of the Porsche 911, but it doesn't necessarily look as though the fairy tale win is going to come, because that pit stop for 150 has dropped it down a lap. There is the Gentleman Trophy leading Ferrari, Jean-Luc Bobelic, behind the wheel of the car. That is up into 16th place. Now, I'm not suggesting it's there because it's a very fast Ferrari. I know that quite a few have dropped out of the race, but a well-driven car will pick up places. Ultimately, a class victory is what they're after, but a good overall result is going to head their way as well. Jean-Luc Bobelic, who goes back to the year 2000, and racing in Renault V6 Clios before he came into GT racing, knows his way around here. He's raced in the event on a number of occasions and has been a regular in Blancpain since the championship started.
And I think you just look at that car, and looking at it to some degree tells you the story as to why this car now is leading the Gentleman Trophy. It doesn't appear to have had any signs of contact with any other car out there. They've kept their noses clean. They're not the quickest package out there, but they are now finding themselves leading the Gentleman Trophy with just about 2.5 hours remaining, and that's the exercise. That's why they're here. They're not here to try and win the race overall. They couldn't do that. They're not quick enough. They can win their own championship, which is the Gentleman's Trophy, and they're doing the best job, and they're leading the category.
By 2 laps from a similar Ferrari. So, looking at my list of what's happened to what car, there's barely anything next to this. It's just gone on metronomically without any dramas. Can it stay that way up to the very end? You know,
in a way, I mean, maybe not in the case of these gentlemen, but in the case of being a racing driver, driving a race like we're just watching this Ferrari do is not actually particularly stimulating, exciting if you are a racing driver, because what a racing driver is somebody who races, not somebody who drives a racing car.
Sure.
And what you're seeing with some of these gentlemen drivers is they're driving a racing car. They're not racing drivers, but they don't pretend to be a racing driver. There's a clear distinction, in my view, between those that are in the pro category and to a lesser degree the pro-am, because that's a mix and match. But that's the distinction between the pro category and the Gentleman Trophy. These people drive race cars, they're not racing drivers.
Yes, they've all got business interests to go back to. Patrice Gouillard, who is probably the quickest driver in the class leading car, has won his class at Le Mans. I mean, he's probably a good, as we saw last year, a good driver to have even in the Pro-Am category. Fred Bouvy is a double winner of the event outright. He drives that car. So they are probably the best overall combination of drivers within the Gentleman Trophy. We've seen second, which is the Lemire Ferrari, and the number 53 Ferrari, currently in third in the class in the pit lane, which has been brought in by Jérôme Demey. And you've also got going strongly in the class there, in fact up into third now, Treble 1, which is the Venezuela car, Venezuela Tourism, and it is Pablo Palladino behind the wheel of it, class winner at Monza last year when he had his old 430 Ferrari. So Ferrari's very definitely defeating Porsche within the Gentleman Trophy, but different teams squabbling over the positions. But the Jérôme Policon run Sofrev car, Sofrev ASP, leading the way. 23 Nissan there in the pits, looking as though it's about to go back into its pit box, into its garage. And that car is in 27th place, Lucas Luhr at the wheel of it. And we heard from James Rumsey earlier on, and he said it's been a bit of a nightmare for us, really, this race. The whole weekend has been a struggle for them. The car never really looked that quick, I'm sad to say, in qualifying. And compared to the Bob Neville run, Nissan really has struggled in the race.
Yeah, it's just quite hard to understand, because ostensibly these cars are identical cars, but in detail they're not. And I think, and also in the setup of the cars, and maybe the JRM Motorsport team have been a little bit more outgoing in some of the setup on the changes that they may have brought with the car to this event, whereas Bob Neville's team are running very much maybe more described as stock spec Nissan, and as a consequence, you're both inexperienced on the one hand with the four drivers from the GT Academy. They are running in 9th place. Very happy indeed. Oh, they were in 9th place.
Yeah, still 9th.
Still 9th place. Yeah. So running very happily in 3rd place. They are, well, they're 3 laps down on 8th place, so that's a step too much. But, you know, what a great result to get those 4 drivers, or 3 drivers in this case, into the top 10 as Academy drivers.
Absolutely. We've not seen for a while number 69 McLaren. I mentioned the car because it's just been given a penalty. It's the Gulf Racing Rob Bell, Adam Carroll, Nico Verdonk car, up into 18th place, Adam Carroll at the wheel, but it's just been given a stop-and-go 10-second stop-go penalty for passing a red light at pit out. The team manager was being summoned to the stewards, and the net result of that is that he's come away with a piece of paper they've all signed saying you've got to stop-go for 10 seconds. And of course 10 seconds may not sound all that long, but when you add it to pit in, to pit out, especially
as for driving through a red light. I can't imagine. I mean, even being colourblind, you couldn't say you drove through a red light. That wouldn't really work. So I have to wait and see what the answer might well be from the team as to why did their driver not stop when the light was showing red.
Number 35 Nissan over the timing line, Wolfgang Reip at the wheel of it. Jan Mardenborough is the man that's given the car over. Jan, previous winner of the PlayStation Academy, and Jan Mardenborough is down in the pit lane with Jack Nicholls, and we'll hear from Jan Mardenborough after a very busy weekend, not just racing in this, but also in British Formula 3, in which he had a 2nd place yesterday. So let's head down to the pits, catch up with Jan and with Jack.
Jan, it's been a busy weekend for you racing Formula 3 as well. How have you found it?
Yeah, it's been quite tough mentally. I mean, all 3 Formula 3 races were in the wet, and that as well demands a lot of concentration. And now here at Spa doing a 24 hours, especially in the night time, you really have to concentrate hard. And mentally it's been tough. Physically it's been okay, but yeah, it's been pretty difficult.
And you must be pleased with 3rd in class at the moment.
Yeah, we are pleased. I mean, well, we were 1st at one point, so yeah, I think I'm not too sure what happened there. I think we got the wrong safety car at one point, so yeah, nice to get on the, hopefully we can get on the podium. There's 2.5 hours left, so anything can happen in that time. So yeah, I mean, the car's been faultless throughout the whole 20 so hours been running, so yeah, fingers crossed it survives.
Were there any concerns after Alex Buncombe's accident that the same problem might happen to you? Did you find out what that was?
Yeah, we were off. Bob, the team manager, he told us to stay off the curbs. I mean, we're not too sure what caused the incident. Obviously, it was quite a big accident, so as soon as it happened, they were on the radio to the drivers to say just stay off the curbs, just because we don't know what caused this issue. And yeah, well, I think now we're sort of backing off because we've got a bit of a gap to the car in 4th, and the cars in 2nd and 1st, they're quite a way up the road. So.
Okay, so Wolfgang's gone out in the car now. We can see him on the monitors going through, coming towards Blancpain, presumably the fastest part of the circuit, this.
Yeah, Blancpain is absolutely fantastic corner. It's a half lift in this car, down into the bus stop chicane. 6th gear down to 1st, and then quickly short shift to 2nd for the left, and try and get the car straight as possible for maximum traction up the corner, and head up to La Source now. I think we're in 5th gear, and then we're down to 2nd gear. Really try to use the cam, all the road on the entry, try and maximise the minimum speed and get a good exit.
And is Eau Rouge more difficult in this car or in the Formula 3 car?
It's more difficult in this car because in the Formula 3 car there's less weight to move around. It's all driver input. Whereas in the GT car you have to be a lot more conscious of weight distribution, and you have to really pitch the car sometimes and use the weight to your advantage to help settle the car.
And then heading up to Les Camps, presumably that's where the Nissan's strongest. We've seen it very quick in a straight line this year.
Yeah, we've been really good for Eau Rouge. We've got quite a lot of downforce. I think we've got good levels of downforce. So if we get a good run out of Eau Rouge, we've got a really strong engine, so we can pass into Le Camps. I think that's the majority of our passes have been over the 21 hours. So yeah, it's good.
Cool. Well, thanks for that, Jan, and best of luck for the rest of the race. Are you out again, or is that you done now?
I think I'm done.
Cool. Thanks.
Cheers.
Good to hear from Jan Mardenborough. Fascinating to hear his take on the circuit as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just after the Alex Buncombe incident very early in the race, and then Bob Neville, team principal of the Nissan team, saying, no, keep away from the curbs. That's like telling a driver not to use full throttle these days. I mean, it's an instinctive thing. If there's a curb, you use it because it, in effect, in the inside of a corner, to some degree, can shorten it, and on the outside of a corner, it can enable a car to get released from that corner and a little bit more speed off the corner. So it goes against the grain. But if that's what the team feels is in the interest of the team, then the drivers are obliged to follow that particular team order.
But you just seen one Nissan from a different team circulating, and here at JRM is a car that's yet again been in the pit box. It's coming back onto the apron. You've got to start the car from the pit apron. You can't do that in the garage and drive out like you might do at home, for example. But this is a car, I'm afraid, that really is trouble. I suppose now the best that team, and indeed others in the same boat, can think of is getting it to the finish, because it becomes a big test session now, and they're learning all the time.
Yeah, but you've got a strong driver lineup, and Lucas Luhr, Peter Dunbrek and Stephen Kane, and this is going to be big disappointment for that car and for the JRM team in general.
Now for fourth place, the battle is hotting up, because Frank Kekkeler has, on his 501st lap, got this car, the Audi of number 2, Christopher Mies, bearing down on him. Last time, Christopher Mies was a little bit quicker than was the BMW. So what was initially a big fight for third because of safety cars and people losing a lap has become a fight for fourth between these two. And behind them, actually, is Oliver Jarvis, who's lapping a bit quicker than the pair. So he's another one to watch for. But he's quite a long way back on this particular lap. He's about half a lap back from the two you're looking at. But for fourth place, Kekkeler versus Mies is something to keep monitoring. The JRM Nissan is in the hands of Lucas Luhr and is ready to go. But that car is now 57 laps down. Yeah,
Lucas Luhr, really a bit of a winning machine, and whatever you put him into an LMP car, a GT car, he is rent me and I'll drive your car. I mean, and he does it North America, Europe. He flies literally every week backwards and forwards to compete in both continents. So disappointing here this weekend for Lucas Luhr. No doubt he'll compensate for it by rocking up back in the States next week and winning in the, was it Magic Milk car he drives? Yes. Sponsor, Magic Milk sponsor.
For a long time associated with Porsches, but in recent years he's been winning championships in Nissans, making his way down the pit lane. You've just seen the Bruno Senna McLaren run by Von Ryan Racing in the pit box as well. How serious that is, not sure whether they've done the brake disc change yet, brake pad and disc change. That could be what's going on there. And that was the contact from the JRM Nissan that has dispatched the speed lover Wim Mulder's driven Porsche. And after that contact, the Nissan has pitted and it's about to rejoin the race. But I suspect the three drivers will be quite pleased for the checkered flag to come at the end of this.
Maybe it's just the long camera view, but it didn't look like the Nissan was picking up speed particularly quickly on the exit of the pit lane. It may just be simply the telephoto lens just doesn't give you the impression of speed as we watch this battle currently going on over fourth place now, just under a second. You can see it there on the track, the BMW and the Audi Kekkeler versus Christopher Mies. And thank goodness we got something, actually a bit of motor racing with 2 hours 20 minutes to go, and this is going to be as intense as anything we've seen throughout the 24 hours.
Go along with that, 0.9 of a second split them when they came onto this lap. You've got to actually say you put your money on the Audi going through at the moment, wouldn't you? Frank Kekkeler is quick, but the way that the Audi has done the catching suggests that it is here looking the stronger of the two cars. They are behind on the track from Jean-Luc Beaubelic's Ferrari, at which the lights are being flashed from the turquoise and black BMW, the familiar now Vita 4-1, previously Vitaphone Racing colours that adorn Michael Bartel's cars. Michael himself running the team, former three-time winner of the event. Out of Speaker's corner, up over the curbs goes Kekkeler, but the Audi is right there and threatening.
Yes, it is, looking to dive down the inside, be ambitious to do it down there, because the BMW is a high downforce car. It can afford to go deeper into the corner, but gets wide on the exit of Pujo and now has been challenged side by side into Fan.
Kekkeler's on the inside line. Is Mies going to go round the outside? Yes, he is. Brave effort that on the outside line. He's ahead as he gets to the apex for the first part of the piff path. Through he goes. And so that puts the Audi now up into fourth. And rather disgruntled Vita 4-1 engineers look at a car that's down in fifth.
It was going to happen. It was helped by the fact that Kekkeler got it wrong in the middle of Pujo, ran wide, got onto the dirty outside part of the corner, and well, Christopher Mies didn't need a second invitation to slot the Audi up the inside, take the position away. But both these cars, I mean, both drivers from both BMW and Audi have been complaining about Audi saying lack of top speed, and BMW saying, oh, well, we don't. The drivers, I'm saying, they don't feel they've got the horsepower. Well, it's a high downforce car, and the Audi, I don't know what the reasons are, but there certainly Audi looked to have more speed than the BMW, but it was helped by the speed off the corner of Christopher Mies to take that position for 4th place.
Now, though, he's got to find a lap from somewhere to get onto terms with the Kessel Racing Ferrari of Davide Rigon. Well, a slow pit stop, a problem for a car ahead. Things can still change. We're not done yet. 2 hours and 19 minutes of this race remain. And you never know what is around the corner. But at the moment, we have got this laps deficit for Richard Lietz, chasing after Maximilian Goetz. Rigon is 3rd, 4th is Mies, 5th is Keklet, 6th is Jarvis. But in Pro-Am, things are still pretty tight there, because Matt Griffin now is starting to bring down the gap. He's 8th overall, but 2nd in class. He's bringing down the gap against Mika Salo. So Pro-Am Ferraris, 71 and 59, are getting closer to one another. There's Frank Stippler enjoying a bit of time off in the garage. Not perhaps enjoying the result as much as last year. He spent most of Sunday stuck in an Audi R8 last year. He really was a hero to help the car win, with Andrea Piccini and René Rast as his co-drivers, but Frank Stippler did the lion's share of the driving. Well, here, again, he has been very, very impressive, but it looks as though, at best, they're going to get 3rd.
Yes, I think best 3rd. Realistically, they're going to stay in 4th place. Done a good job again, another professional drive from 3 professional drivers, Andre Lotterer, Frank Stippler and Christopher Mies. You know, not having the quickest car out and out pace terms, and they just had to drive a 24-hour race, not a sprint race. That could be a 24-hour race. It's just get there, consistency, don't overdrive the car, don't put the car into jeopardy, and whatever we get in the end is what we'll take.
Over the line comes 44. Davide Rigon at the wheel of it, another single-seater start turned GT racer. Now there, lights are flashing, is Richard Lietz working his way through the traffic as he comes down towards Pouant now. He's a lap down on the race leading car, so track position suggests he's almost 2 laps back, but in real terms it is just the 1 lap between the 2 cars. He's pushing on, fractionally quicker in the sectors, but by 1/10 of a second when you're a lap down, it really doesn't matter a jot, does it? He needs something bad to happen to the leading Mercedes, and a bit of a rattling noise from that Ferrari, so it's got something dragging on the ground as it went through the pith path. Let's have another listen. Possibly a bit of the floor dragging on the ground. The Gentleman Trophy Sport Garage Ferrari continues, but maybe all is not well there. Perhaps it's been bounced over a curb too many.
Well, the Porsche running in the 225, same pace as the lead Mercedes of Maximilian Goetz. So pace has dropped off in this, coming into the final sector, or final 3 hours, 2 hours, 16 minutes. Track pretty rubbished up with rubber and bodywork and shards of carbon fibre. And everybody's tired. Yeah, it was absolutely. And you know, everybody gets tired. The teams are tired in the pit lane. The drivers are probably reasonably fit because they train for this. But nevertheless, you know, the heat soak you get in a car, the level of concentration that they've been required to apply over these 24 hours. So are we seeing now consolidation in an effect from Richard Lietz in the Porsche? Last lap 2:26. Well, just 0.8 of a second slower than the lead car. He needs to find chunks of time per lap to make any impression now whatsoever on the leading Mercedes.
It's a lap and a minute, effectively, that he is behind. What he really needs is some bad luck, like a puncture, to just take away some of that advantage. But he can't do it alone. He can't do it on pure pace. That Mercedes has run like clockwork during the course of the race. The stands are starting to fill up again as the fans come back ready for the finish of the race, being led at the moment by the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. And there you go. That'll make a nice coffee table when you get home. I've been using it as a very large belt. I'm not quite sure that's a real fashion statement, but get it home and you'll find a whole new use for that.
Yeah, no, it's part of coming to an event, and particularly a 24-hour race. There will be plenty of souvenirs around the racetrack for the fans to pick up on their way back as we watch the Aston Martin. You'd think that was Stefan Muka driving it, the way the body language of the car.
It is. Oh, there you go, you see.
Just have to look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, the speed up through Eau Rouge over radio.
23rd it is. It was on pole position. It led the first hour of the race, and try as Nick Katzberg did yesterday, he couldn't find a way through. There's Daniel Mackenzie making his way to the front of the garage. We may hear from him, I suspect, in a moment if he's getting his overalls togged up like that. And yesterday Nick Katzberg did his level best to get past Stefan Mucker. He just could not do it. But the Aston Martin is going very strongly. 23rd overall, and he is going strongly, Stefan Mucker, in this car. So Daniel Mackenzie, ex-single-seater racer, in fact, we saw walking to the front of the garage. There is a good reason for that. He's about to speak to Jack Nicholls.
So Dan, Stefan's out in the car now. It looks like he's pushing pretty hard.
Yeah, obviously coming back from the 2 incidents earlier in the morning where we had 2 splitter issues and tyre issues. We lost 30-odd laps. So he's pushing hard, and we're going for some points, but it's all about trying to get a little bit out of this weekend after 2 incidents there.
Of course, you led the opening hour of the race, but you knew that it was never going to be in contention for the overall win. But to be 30 laps down must be a real disappointment.
It's disappointing, you know. Unfortunately, that's what motorsport is about. You get the highs and you get the lows. So it's not ideal, but it's shown that the car can have pace, and it can show that there could be victories and podiums available there.
And how have you found your first 24-hour race?
Yeah, it's quite something, that's for sure. It's been quite tough. It's tough trying to find a little bit of sleep with these noisy things going round, but I enjoyed it, and yeah, absolutely loved it. Fantastic.
You'll do another one?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Cheers, Dan.
Cheers.
Of course, the other good thing of a long 24-hour race when you drive for Beechdene is that there's plenty of time to eat the ice cream that Andrew Howard's company manufactures. They very generously did a lap of the press room yesterday, but they've not been seen for 20 hours or so, but went down very well to fuel us for the start of the race.
Well, it was a bit warm yesterday, so there was a big demand on the product. Today is a little bit cooler, and I think the product was pretty much sold out, if you like to put it in those terms. Again, looking skyward, there's a little bit of grey coming over. Interesting, just on the Aston Martin, Stefan Mucker behind the wheel, and you can just see the car as it comes over radio. Stefan Mucker lapping actually currently quicker than the lead cars by, well, nearly a second. The last lap, 2 minutes 23.9, driving in 23rd place, 40 laps down. That's a racing driver. He's not here just to make up the numbers, even though he's 40 laps down. He's out driving the wheels off the Aston Martin.
And that's why he's put into the car by John Gore, the MD of Aston Martin Racing. He has put works drivers into different teams for the weekend. There you go, Andrew Howard. You can have Stefan Mucker. You, Beechdene, can have pole position. How about that? Aston Martin on pole position for the Spa 24 hours, and therefore all the coverage for the build-up. So I reckon John Gore, very good racing driver himself, of course, made a pretty good choice there, putting Stefan Mucker into that well-run car.
Yeah, I mean, it's great when a driver like Mucker is available to the private entrance, to the Pro-Am entry, but it's a disappointment in the same time, because a pro driver like Mucker is a driver capable of winning this race along with teammates of a comparable level. So that is sometimes the penalty of being a factory driver, that you don't always necessarily have the choice to where the factory might choose to sort of direct you for a particular race.
Sure. But when you go into the Pro-Am category, you know it's a class win you're after, and Mika Salo will probably be thinking the same thing. He has gone well this weekend, so have his co-drivers, and SMP Racing has really made a big impact in the Blancpain Endurance Series this year. It's arrived with a fleet of cars and some very good drivers, pros and AMs, across the entry to run them, not just in this race, but across the whole championship. And so Mika Salo leads the class and is responding to the challenge of Matt Griffin behind. So here you've got a veteran, really, of Ferrari racing and GT cars, Mika Salo, being chased hard by one of the young guns in GT racing, and there's certainly no argument about Matt Griffin's pace, but for the moment he can't quite get himself near enough to challenge Mika Salo.
No, he's got it under 20 seconds, just 18.1, and it's been hovering around that for some number of laps.
You were talking most eloquently about the way Stefan Mucker drives. Have a guess who's being warned about respecting the track limits now?
Bernd Schneider.
No, try again.
Stefan Otelli. There he is, Stefan Otelli in the pit.
Stefan Mucker is being told not to keep putting four wheels over the white line at Blanchimont. Stefan Otelli, sad to say, long since out of the race, but smiling just as he was when we saw him at lunchtime, and he's here to cheer his teammates home.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Audi do, is they are a team, and even though you're out of the race and way too early, they hang around and support the team. Currently the car in fourth place, Christopher Mies, and if the team can get onto the podium. It's a big ask because they're 2 laps down in the 3rd place. David Rigon Ferrari, but nevertheless, it's still 2 hours 10 minutes to go. Should this Audi find itself in a position to get on the podium, the entire Audi team, including those drivers who stopped many, many hours ago, will be there to cheer and support their co-drivers. And it's part of the camaraderie, of the esprit de corps of this Audi driver lineup.
That 0-4 on the windscreen is its position in class in the Pro Cup and overall, as it turns out. This Luminac display being used in the event for the first time, and it's been very useful for everybody to find the position of the cars as they come past you, especially as the order becomes so jumbled after all the pit stops. The leading car now has had 22 pit stops. The most of anybody that's still circulating is 26, which is one of the SMP Ferrari's Debbie Marcozov. Well, we've seen Stefan Ortelli out of the race, but let's hear from him now with Jack.
Stefan, unfortunately your car's out of the race, but still chance of a good finish for WRT.
A good finish, that means podium, and I think everything we are doing here so far, it's perfect on car number 2. The pits are amazing, and we are not the quickest for sure, but we can still get a podium finish. We just have to get a bit of luck with the cars in front of us. Realistically, we can't fight against them, but we are perfect here in the pit, perfect on the track. These 3 drivers are just amazing. And with Miss, we were on the podium last year, and I just told him that you can come back, but you have to be on the podium again.
And we saw you and Laurence out the back, very disappointed last night when the car had to retire. I mean, how did it feel when you knew you couldn't continue?
It's WRT. We are starting with 4 cars. The first time the car is out, okay, it was unfortunately it was our car, but you have to focus on the other 3 cars, and then you have one more less, and now it starts to be. We really are counting on the car number 2, and we already forgot what happened to us yesterday. I mean, now we have to put an Audi on the podium. That's the only target.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So there is one of the surviving Audis. It certainly isn't the result that was anticipated, and I hold my hands up to saying that Petit goes very, very wide at Blanchimont. I really wasn't expecting Audi to be quite so struggling for pace over the course of the race. I did think they were keeping their powder dry, let's put it that way, after qualifying. Everybody within the team saying, oh no, we can't win the race this year. But Stefan Ortelli did an absolutely stunning job in his double stint. He got the car well up in the top 10, brought it into the pit lane, and it just wouldn't restart. And that was a starter relay that needed changing, but from then on in it went from bad to worse. But that, I think, would have been a car after his excellent work early on that could have had a chance to run with the leaders, and others were lost during the night with damage. But it's been a very Audi-like Spa 24 hours.
Yes, it has, and I mean, especially people like Stefan Ortelli and Laurence Van Thor, who we know can win in this car and in some of the other events. And here we're just seeing what is the best of the Audis currently in 4th place, co-driver in this car.
Frank Stippler is another of the drivers of car 2, watching Christopher Mies behind the wheel, and Frank is with Jack.
Frank, is there any chance of an overall podium?
No, I don't think so. And be quite happy, and this is what we are looking at. We have to push quite hard, very hard for the car, very hard for the drivers. I mean, we have to keep the fingers crossed to end up above the finish line anyway. So it will be a nice race if we finish 4th.
Are the conditions any different today to yesterday? It's a bit cooler today. Does that help in strategy in any way?
No, it helps a little bit our car, because we were nowhere when it was a little bit more hot. It seems to be that the Audi suffers a little bit more than the other cars when it's getting hot. And now we only lose 1 second runners. And yesterday it was around 2 seconds, so quite hopeless. And that's the reason why we are 2 or 3 laps down. So. Not too exciting regarding the victory, but anyway, we keep on fighting for the 4th position now.
Thank you.
So Frank Stippler heads back to the garage to go and look at the times on the screen as the leader comes into the pit lane then at the end of lap 514. The car is in the sequence of pit stops, slightly distorted by the safety car that we had after the accident involving Ian Dockrell and Enzo Ida. So we've had 5 safety car interventions in the race, far fewer than we were expecting. And just in case you were concerned about the veracity of John's weather app, still not a drop of rain.
Well, the app is as reliable here as it's going to be when I take my little trip down to the beach. Then we see the lead car returning or leaving the pits once again, and it was brought in by Maximilian Götz, assuming that it's still Maximilian Götz behind the wheel. We need to get that confirmed once the car trips over the pit lane exit. But I mean, I'm very surprised that this event, which traditionally does have a period of rain, and there was certainly rain over Saturday morning, and in fact throughout the week there have been quite heavy rainstorms coming across. So far we haven't had rain. If there's been a few drops, that's been the maximum. So I mean, how many times can you say you've been to Spa 24 and not had any rain involved?
So through goes the Porsche, passing the Mercedes that's still trundling down the pit lane. The Mercedes has done 514 laps. The Porsche has done 513 laps. There is still a lap between them, but of course this narrows the gap on track between the two cars. And you've got Richard Liet still pushing on to good effect.
Well, there is the Mercedes getting back on track. And so it's now Maximilian Buch who has done a stunning job for the team all weekend. So the diminutive driver, yeah, you can see him. I mean, literally, there's head and not a lot else.
Absolutely. We've been talking about Nissans, both having good and bad times in this race. I've been joined by Darren Cox, who is the head of Nissan Motorsports Global Programme. It's been a sort of bittersweet event for you, this, Darren, hasn't it?
Well, yes. Half an hour into the race, we obviously had a big incident with the 32 car, Alex Buncombe going off somewhere you don't really want to go off at the speed he did at Eau Rouge.
No, quite.
And for the 35 car, things have got better since then, really. But the JRM guys, the 23 and the 230, are having a very tough weekend.
Have you got time to tell us everything that's gone wrong? Because sad to say, every time we see one of the JRM cars, it seems to be in strife.
Yes, no, I can't. I haven't got time. But the great thing is the car you see on screen there now, the 35 car, has gone without any issues at all.
Darren, tell us please, because we don't understand it, the Bob Neville cars have been running more competitively, consistently than the JRM cars. I mean, they're ostensibly the same cars, so why is there a difference between the performance of the two teams?
Crikey, that's a difficult question to answer.
You're the man, you're the man, give us the answer.
Isn't
the
it?
fans want to know.
Well, I think, Bob, the guys down Sands and did extremely well in the GT1 Championship, which they won the World Championship a couple of years ago. So, the experiences are similar, but I guess the philosophies are different. If you see the way the cars handle, I'm sure you're looking, John, you're probably better placed to explain than me. They have got a different handling philosophy, for example, and that's in motor racing. I'm sure the Audis are set up differently, for example. So,
do they share much on data, or do they both go their own way? And
yes, but they are literally they're very different philosophies. So if you change one thing, everything else on the car setup changes. But I've just been out around the circuit, and what a wonderful place this is to go and have a look. And you see not only our cars handling differently, but all the cars handling differently. I know why the gentleman drivers buy Ferraris, by the way.
Well, we're looking now on board one of your cars. Wolfgang Wright is the driver. This is 35. That is 9th overall, 3rd in Pro-Am, and we've made the point, John and I, during the course of the race. This is a car entirely driven by winners of the Nissan PlayStation GT Academy. You must be well proud of this.
I'm very, very proud, and I think Jan Marden was getting the headlines, but I've got to say Peter Pizzera, who's got the least experience this year, has done an absolutely mega job. If you look at his average stint times, he's been going very, very well. Obviously, Wolfgang's racing not only in the Blancpain Series, but also the FIA GT Series. He's got a lot of seat time. Jan has got a lot of seat time, a lot of things this year, as has Lucas, but Peter's only doing the Blancpain Series. So this time last year, we hadn't even chosen him, so he's doing a mega job.
Well, that's the question. I mean, how many thousands of young boys and girls took part in the competition, and how did you manage to get them. I mean, there's so many to get through.
Well, last year we had 857,000 people enter, and then we've got a very rigorous process to try and find the best driver. Obviously, the first year we were learning, so when we found Lucas, people thought it might have been we were lucky, or it was something that couldn't be replicated. Actually, we've got much better at choosing the drivers, and now we churn them out. I was personally involved in the first couple. Now I stand back because I know that the process works.
I'll hold my hands up. When I first heard about it, I thought that's going to be a bit of a novelty, getting somebody from PlayStation couch to cockpit. But not only have you found star drivers every time, they continue to get better and better and better. And that's down to that process. So it's not just sending an entry form, is it? The selection process is pretty rigorous.
The selection process is very, very rigorous, obviously online, which is the difference to other academies that exist out there. And what it is, if anyone's seen the film Moneyball, it's just about numbers. The more numbers you pour in at the top of the funnel, the better chance you've got of finding a good guy. Who says that the rich dad's kid is going to be the guy that's got the most talent? Definitely not. But we're going to choose from 857,000 people. We've got a better chance of finding a talent, as we have done.
So how do you narrow it down? Well, you start with that huge number. What happens next?
Well, these guys all race online, and they are so dedicated to this. They're 4 and 5 hours a day driving. Now, of course, yes, that means that they can turn the steering wheel, they can push the pedals and brakes and get the lines and everything else. But actually, that dedication of continuously replicating the same thing over and over again is what a racing driver has to do in a 24-hour race without mistake.
Darren, gender equality is a big thing right now in life generally, and even coming into motor racing. When are we going to see a young lady being promoted into one of these cars?
Well, it's the same thing as in Formula One, really, is there's not that many girl gamers that play the racing games. If we had more of them, we would find a very good lady racing driver. I'm absolutely convinced. Both my daughters would tell me that that's exactly what I should be doing next. So they need to be playing on Gran Turismo. A bit too young yet, but absolutely, we would love to see an expansion of the program. But the first thing we're going to do is expand globally. We're in Russia, the US. We're in Europe. We've just done Middle East and South Africa. You just saw a shot of our garage there. We've got our Middle East and South African winner from this year. They're going through the training process at the moment, so we'll probably see them at a race like this next year. And we're going to look further afield. There's lots of opportunity out there for markets that don't have a heritage of motor racing at the moment.
Darren, long may this programme continue. Best of luck for the rest of the race.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Darren Cox from Nissan Motorsport, and we've been talking largely about number 35, which is currently running in 9th spot, 3rd in Pro-Am. And that is an excellent effort for, as we've been making the point, people that have come purely from the PlayStation Academy competition. Well, 84 leads the way, and for the moment we've got the 2 leaders back on the lead lap, but again it's going to change on the next round of pit stops. We are into the last 2 hours of the race then now, and the Spa 24 hours has given us drama throughout. And as the leading car heads up to the bus stop, let's have another look back at some of the highlights of the 2013 race. Under sunny skies, the grid prepared itself, ready for the 4:30 start yesterday afternoon. Pole position to Stefan Mucker in the Beechdene AMR Aston Martin. Redfoo was on the grid, ready to look at the cars in anticipation of the concert he performed late in the day. The teams and the garages could only sit and wait. Stefan Mucker got on board the pole position car, and then we were ready to go. Behind the pace car, ready for the 4:30 start. We almost had a first corner accident. Alessandro Pierguidi had this big spin. Nick Tandy just missed him. Cars went left and right in avoidance. The Manthey Porsche delayed as it had to run wide as well. And that set up some battles all the way up through the field as Alvaro Parent took on Maximilian Goetz in the Mercedes, and we lost Alex Buncombe in this spectacular accident. He whacked into the tyres at Eau Rouge, showered the photographers with debris, and not surprisingly, that brought out the safety car. Everybody bunched up on the restart. Stefan Mucker led away once again. That restart didn't last long. Jos Menton crashed going uphill. The Blancpain Racing Lamborghini was out of the race. The damage front, back and sides was too great for it to go any further. Troubles also for Hexis Racing, whose McLaren was overheating. It had also got alternator problems, and that limped back to the pit lane, as all was good for Mark van der Straaten's team. Maxime Martin headed for the pit lane in car 3, and Nick Katzberg, who'd spent much of the opening stint trying to find a way past Stefan Mucker, eventually got the lead as the Aston pitted, and then it was his turn to come for the pit lane as well. Car 4 blasted back into the race down towards La Source. The battles then continued out on track, as Henri Moser did an excellent job behind the wheel of the second Mark VDS BMW. But 84 Mercedes had stopped early. That had a splash and dash effectively under the first safety car. It was out of sequence, which meant that whenever it came into the pits there were fewer cars than those that came in around the hour mark, and it was also creeping up the order and becoming a real threat for honours. Fans, young and old, watched on as the battles continued, but the race didn't continue for much longer for car 14 as Jens Klingmann parked it with a broken engine, and he was only just avoided by the SMP Ferrari. Carl Wendlinger got rid of Marco Schelp. He got a drive-through for his trouble. There was a big repair bill, though, for the Porsche. Patrick Pilet pulled off a great move to go around the outside of two back markers and the race leader heading up towards Les Combes. Jelmer Berman dropped back to second as the Porsche swooped around the outside of him. The Mark VDS team pretty impressed by that, even though it cost one of their cars a place. Berman then pitted, but he double stinted, so he stayed behind the wheel of the car, and it wasn't long before the Manthey Racing Porsche came in as well for Patrick Pilet to give way to the man that had started the race in the car, Mark Lieb. In he came. Jelmer Berman went back ahead on track, but as the cars make their way from Eau Rouge up towards the top of the hill, so the gap started to come down whilst the Porsche was back on track, and it didn't take Mark Lieb long to get himself right onto the tail of the BMW. Sweeping downhill, he was able to use the traffic to his advantage. He managed to block Berman in behind the slower Ferraris. He went to the inside of Pouin, and the Porsche swept by back ahead of the number 3 BMW. As the cars headed for the darkness, battles continued in all of the three classes: Pro Cup, Pro Am and the Gentleman Trophy, and the quicker cars busy flashing their headlights at the back markers to encourage them to get out of the way. It was still Porsche versus BMW as the darkness fell, the brakes glowing red hot on the BMW, but off track the number of distractions were starting to increase. Spa looked as majestic as ever, and an early firework display came from Johnny Adam in the Beach Dean Aston carbon fibre, lacerating a tyre and bringing that into the pit lane. The picture postcard view of Spa as the cars pounded on into the night. Xavier Marson was all hot and bothered after his stint behind the wheel, but still finding time to smile. The firework display got underway, so too did the concert, and the fans were out in force. The hospitality guests were also enjoying life. If only the people in the pit lane could have relaxed in the same way. They had a long night ahead of them, and a number of cars with lots of problems meant that they were also quite regular visitors. We lost the 25 BMW that crashed out in the night. Number 4 led at the 6-hour mark and got points in the championship for that. But it didn't come through the other side of night, because as dawn broke, number 4 was out with a suspected alternator problem, and as some mechanics caught up on sleep and the fans got the barbecue ready for breakfast, there was the sad sight of number 3 Mark VDS BMW out of the race as well. They started with 3 and none survived to dawn. A puncture for Mark Henrici. He headed for the pit lane, and so Sunday morning set us up with a new look front of the battle. It was Mercedes versus Porsche. It was the HTP Motorsport car versus Manthey Racing. And in the Gentleman Trophy, Daniel De Breuer had this big spin coming out of Speaker Corner, and the brave marshals got him out of the way. The mechanics still had pit stops to perform. Tyre changes for Vita 4-1, a car that may not have had the outright pace, but has gone very solidly indeed and is still running within the top 5. Ferrari fans well catered for, though, in this year's edition of the 24 Hours of Spa. The car that led the Pro Cup in the championship pre-event made a pit stop, having worked its way into the top 3. Davide Rigon giving way to Cesar Ramos, and another set of Pirellis going on board the car. The lead battle continued as Mercedes and Porsche slugged it out on track, but the Mercedes just seemed to be the quicker of the two. When it pitted, so the Porsche got back into the lead, but on track the Mercedes had the grunt to go through once again. McLaren's had a really lousy night. There were only 2 left by the time we got to the early hours of the morning, and Bruno Senna survived this moment, tapped into a spin by the Pro-Speed Porsche. He was able to rejoin, but a few more places lost. The Team WRT mechanics were losing cars fast. One car had crashed out in the night, the other out with accident damage. Number 35 Nissan was going strongly, so strongly over the curb in fact that it dislodged the Lumirang display. Ferrari versus BMW in the Pro Cup, as Cesar Ramos lined up to have a go on Stefano Colombo, and that put him up into 4th place, going down towards La Source. Gulf Racing mechanics had a really long night. very limited sleep, and they were desperately trying to get some shut-eye as the race continued. Out of the pits came the Mercedes, back into the lead went the Manthey Racing Porsche. Ben Schneider was getting ready for his next stint behind the wheel. Schneider having won in Dubai and the Nürburgring 24-hour races this year, and also the Bathurst 12-hour, a winner of this race back in 1989, looking for his second victory after a fair absence of years. Fans young and old looked on as into the garage for a brake pad change went the number 2 Audi. André Loftre, the man behind the wheel of it. He rejoined, but soon had a spin. There was no damage done to the car, but it took him a while to rejoin. Something electrical prevented it from picking up straight away, and the new Kangaroo Audi bounced its way eventually back into the race. Xavier Martin got ready for another stint behind the wheel of the Pro Speed Porsche. There was a punctured tyre for 53 Ferrari, and Pirelli had certainly done good business here with so many teams and so many tyres being used. 84 Mercedes through the pits, still looking strong, and although it would lose out yet again on a pit stop to the Porsche, it wasn't long before Ben Schneider was getting himself onto the tail of the Manthey racing car. And how about this for a move for a man who's in retirement? Right round the outside went Ben Schneider on the dirty line. You see the dust be kicked up as he goes through the pit path. He came out ahead. Louis Machiel's the next casualty. Big accident at the foot of Eau Rouge, off into the tar barrier. The AF Corsa car that had led the Pro-Am class out of the race. Louis limped away. He's okay, but a bit bruised and battered. But significantly, that's taken one of the top cars in the class out of the race. The Manthey Racing Porsche rejoined, but dropped a lap as the safety car came out to Louis Machiel's incident. The safety car peeled off. Mark Lieb went for it, charged through the traffic, unlapped himself before the all-important safety car line you can see painted across the road. The stewards had a look at it. Guilty, they said. A drive-through was the penalty. More contact. Enzo Ida completely misjudged where he was on the track in relation to Ian Dockrell. 2 wrecked cars and another monster accident down at Stavelot. So that was our 5th safety car period of the race. Wim Mulders got nudged off the track by the JRM Nissan. He rejoined in his dog-eared Porsche. And running a little bit wide was Frank Kekler. That enabled Christopher Mies to come up alongside him. The BMW and the Audi ran together in the fight for 4th, round the outside when the Audi R8 LMS Ultra, and that put Mies ahead of the Vita 4.1 BMW. Some fans had picked up some pretty useful souvenirs, but the race now, with 520 laps done, is being led by the number 84 Mercedes. Confirmation then of how the race looks at the moment, with Mercedes and Porsche on the same lap with a minute between them after the most recent round of pit stops. Ferrari 3rd, Audi 4th, BMW 5th, and then it's Audi 6th. 7th is where you find the leading Pro-Am entry. 8th, the opposition. It's Matt Griffin at the moment, being chased by Maurizio Mediani. 3rd in the class, the Nissan in the hands of Wolfgang Reip. Up into the top 10, good effort this. Mark Henrici has brought the Pro Speed Porsche kicking and screaming. 11th is Adam Christodoulou and 12th is Luca Persiani. In 13th place now is Olivier Pla. In 14th place, Matteo Bobbi. 15th is the leading gentleman trophy car of Jean-Luc Beaubalique. And then in 16th spot, Nicolas Lapierre ahead of Nico Verdonk. In 18th now is Bruno Senna. 19th is Devi Markozov. And 20th, Romain Brandella, who is 2nd in the Gentleman Trophy. 21st, it is Gaetano Aldagno Perez. 22nd is Martin Ranginger ahead of Stefan Mucker. 24th now is the Lebed Mercedes. And in 25th place, it is Jérôme Denet ahead of the Porsche, currently being driven by Pierre Hershey. Then the troubled Nissan, currently Stephen Kane is behind the wheel of it, and after that you have Dudley Dermont, but then you get into the realms of those that are out of the race. The number 16 Audi we know all about, for example, because of its damage, and there are others down there, I'm afraid, that have also long since departed the scene. We started with 65 in real terms now. We've probably got about 30 running. The temperature, 25 degrees, much cooler today than it was yesterday, and also the clouds are starting to build up again. We saw them this morning, they looked pretty threatening, but they decided they'd go and play somewhere else rather than at Spa. But I just wonder, with now an hour and 3/4 to go, whether the weather may have something to say in these last few laps.
Well, ironically, the humidity levels are also dropping, which indicates that maybe it's not going to rain. They were higher early in the morning and early in the midday. So the clouds are arriving, but the humidity reading is dropping, which is sort of, to me, contradictory. But, you know, we're in Spa, and logic doesn't always follow. So will this race ultimately end with rain falling, or are we going to see a dry Spa 24 for some considerable time.
Well, maybe we had our fill of the rain last year, because it was hellishly wet last year for this race. Maximilian Buch is behind the wheel of the leading Mercedes currently, and he's turning his way, as you can see now, through Blanchimont. That car making its way up towards the completion of lap 5:22, an hour and 3/4 to go. This has just not missed a beat, this car.
I mean, the car has looked wonderful all the way through the race. All three drivers have driven a wheel-perfect race. They've not put the car into jeopardy. I don't want to put the commentator's curse on this, but they, to my knowledge, have not had any difficulty with tyres, where all around them have been suffering from tyre failures, which are caused, no doubt, by running over debris on the racetrack or maybe being aggressive with the curbs. This car, so far, has looked absolutely pretty much untouchable.
Absolutely. HTP Motorsport, run by Dieter Eberling, who was the man that founded Heiko Motorsport. If you think back to the start of the programme for this Mercedes SLS, Heiko Motorsport ran the cars. That was Dieter Eberling's team. HTP comes from a Dutch investment company, and eventually Dieter Eberling bought the DTM Persson Motorsport team, relocated it, and as Heiko was dispensed with, so HTP became the team name. And for events like this, where they need a whole army of mechanics, which they don't need for the ADAC GT Masters Championship that they do, they have this alliance with the Harose Motorsport team. And apparently, according to Jan Harose, that's how you pronounce it, not Charuz, but the closest you'll get in Czech is Harose. And they bring the Harose Motorsport mechanics to help on the multitude of pit stops, and their hard work has kept the car at the forefront of the race. And with the efforts of Dieter Eberling overseeing everything, it looks as though this is going to be a win for Mercedes in the Spa 24 Hours, and if that were the case, it would be the first Mercedes victory in the event since 1964.
And what was the model of Mercedes in 1964?
Wasn't here, can't tell you.
Because I don't know what Mercedes were racing in 64, other than their sort of version of what would be today described as a touring car.
I will research for you at my next available opportunity.
Look at that sky, look at the sky.
Come on, rain, let's have some rain just to see what we can get out of the last few laps of this race. It's the one thing we haven't had. It's the one thing that is going to give yet another element of drama in all of this. So as the field turns its way for the 5:23rd time towards the end of the lap, Mercedes still pounds on, looking so strong. And for third place now, Christopher Mies has got himself on the same lap as Cesar Ramos, so we could yet have a change or a battle for third spot. We're looking at the second place car, as you can see from the display on the windscreen, in Pro-Am, the SMP Ferrari. Maurizio Mediani has taken over from Mika Salo. Mika, the ex-Formula 1 racer, is down in the pit lane. He's had a very good run in this race. Let's hear from him now with Jack Nicholls.
So, Mika, you're in the battle for the lead of Pro-Am. Do you think you can win it?
Well, we try, yeah. It's 1 hour 40 minutes to go, and we think there's only one AF Corsa car in the same lap with us, and we're sort of changing position all the time, but we think that they have to stop twice before the end, and we stop only once, so it will be close with them. I hope we can win, because my friend Wilander is in that car, so I have to beat him, otherwise he will give me so much bad things about it. So.
How are you enjoying this 24-hour race? Do you have a lot of experience in 24 hours?
I've done quite a few years now, so it's hard at the beginning. In our team, both Russian boys are first time in 24-hour race, so they need a little bit to learn how to relax between the stints, and I've been sleeping comfortably in the noise there, so no problem. But it's just experience, not to hit anything, stay out of trouble, and rest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack. Mika Salo a bit breathless, having just stepped out of the car, and all very good advice. Part of the programme a team needs to supply a driver with. So we see the Ferrari coming down the pit lane and just about to get back onto track. But to go back to this whole issue about how you relax between driver stints, normally the well-organised professional teams do provide hospitality, motorhomes usually, and each driver's got his own private little berth in that he can go and rest. And the better equipped teams will bring physios along with them as well, so ensure, and if you haven't got a physio or your dietitian with you, then you're going to be a little bit in the back foot, and particularly after the start of this race. Very, very warm conditions indeed for the opening first 4 to 5 hours. So we're just watching this battle for the Pro-Am, currently being led by Wilander, not Mats Wilander, in the 59. So it's only Wilander. Mats Wilander, the tennis player. But there is the 71 car, which is what? If you see the difference in the racetrack, is very little difference in time. So 71 is being driven right now by I can't even know, Mezzini. That's who it is. So the battle for that Pro-Am CAS, 7th and 8th overall, and the gap is, there's the lead car of that category. That's the lead car of the gentleman's category, the 20.
It is, yeah. Fred Bouvier, double winner behind the wheel of it. He was the man that won in the days of Peugeot 306s winning this race, which you've got to say was not its finest period compared to what SRO have put on in GT terms.
No, absolutely. And SRO brought a great field of cars and a great field of drivers to this event. And as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this is really where I see the future of endurance racing, and with cars that are, basically cars you can go and buy from your local dealer.
Absolutely right. And the variety that we had going into this race, 9 different brands all represented on the grid, and there's the 59 Tony Villander driven Ferrari now that leads in Pro-Am. He and Matt Griffin, I think we heard earlier on, would now do the stints to the end, which makes sense if you can maximise their time in the car, because they are the fastest of the drivers, with all due deference to Duncan Cameron and to Alex Mortimer, who's certainly no slouch himself. But Tony Villander now then, who races in the WEC, we've seen him racing in the FIA GT1 World Championship in the past, powers downhill. And AF Corsa, Amato Ferrari's team, very much one of the top Ferrari squads anywhere in the world, and this car looks like it's on for a class win.
Yeah, like that. I mean, Tony Villander, top driver in whatever category, whatever manufacturer you put him in, and again you just can see the body language of the Ferrari that comes up over Eau Rouge and Raidillon down the Camel Straight. And you're talking about cars that get into trouble, and we've seen a lot of cars having tires getting cut down, coming in with flat tires. It's the way that these drivers use the curb. It's not the curb itself, it's the way you use the curb. Some are sliding over it and really cutting the tire with a bad angle. It's how you use the curb that really gives you the benefit.
This Pro Speed Porsche has done well to get back into the top 10. Mark Henrici is driving it, and he comes then through Bruxelles. He's taken the car over from Xavier Marson, and we can catch up with Xavier because he's in the pits with Jack.
So Xavier, a very difficult day yesterday, but you've done well to get back into the top 10.
Yeah, of course. It's been a long race. It's been a big battle and a battlefield. A lot of cars gone out, a lot of cars with problems. So did we. We had some small issues, some tires, some electrics. So we had a little fire in the beginning of the race. But yeah, we're still running, and the car's feeling good. So far so good. We finish in the top 10 hopefully, but still 2 hours to go. So keeping the fingers crossed.
And I guess the biggest challenge for the team was this 911 car behind us, because they had all sorts of problems, and unfortunately now out of the race.
Yeah, they also had a lot of problems in the beginning. They had the same electrical problem. And after that, they had, I don't know what they all had. They had basically everything I think you can imagine. But yeah, I mean, it's a battlefield. It's always a 24-hour race. You see everything that happens, and still, I think the race is not over yet. So we need to see what's going to happen in the last 1.5 hour.
So you're about to do that last 1.5 hour. Are you going to be pushing hard to try and make progress, or just trying to keep it all under control?
No, I think the gap is too big for the moment. I think we're 10 or 12 laps behind the leaders. The gap to the front, there's nothing to gain, only to lose. So we're keeping it cool and doing our laps on a reasonable pace, and keep bringing the car home.
Thanks, Xavier.
Mark Henrici is the man behind the wheel of the car. Mark, who doesn't just race, but he's also very actively involved with his regional part of the ADAC, the German organising motorsport body, and therefore plays quite a big part in actually getting together the final round of the championship at the Nürburgring. He was instrumental last year in helping to have that dual event between Blancpain and the FIA GT1 World Championship, and it's going to be a good way to end the season, because you've got the Blancpain Endurance Series Championship Showdown, you've got the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, British Formula 3 and Classic Endurance as well, the Historic Sports Car Championship. So if you've not been to the Nürburgring before and you like GT racing, then I'd recommend it to you that weekend.
Yeah, Mark Henrici in effect gave up his motor racing career to get into that more administrative side of motorsport, but the lure of the cockpit, the lure of being behind the wheel of a GT car, And particularly here in Spa-Francorchamps has been too much. So Marc Henrici back this year in the Blancpain Series in this Porsche.
And a fine fellow. He's a former Alfa Romeo champion, you know.
Yeah, good cars, good cars. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything bad about Alfa Romeo.
Sure you wouldn't. How about this car? We've talked a lot in the course of the race about the McLarens having had a pretty lousy race. Well, number 69 with the Belgian Nico Verdonk at the wheel now is in 16th place and 23 laps down on the leaders, which is not what they want to be known for, but it's still going. But it's been a trouble race for this team.
It's been trouble for McLaren all the way through. Yeah. I mean, if you took those three drivers, Verdonk, Carroll and Bell, and put them into the lead Porsche or the leading group of cars, the Porsche or the Mercedes, they would be winning this race. And it's just McLaren have got a lot of work to do. They've got the foundations of a superb car. It is a superb car, but they've just got to get on top of the issues that are precluding the car from delivering its full potential. And that's not going to really happen in the remaining part of this season, with one more race in the Blancpain Championship remaining at the Nürburgring. But they've got a winter in which they can develop the car, do more testing, and I mean, really all they've got to do is go out and buy a Mercedes SLS or a Porsche or an Audi and just say, look, what do they do that we're not doing?
Some good brains. Ignore the team, but in McLaren itself, Andrew Kirkcaldy is the man that runs the whole project. And Andrew, very good racing driver himself, and has run teams, the CR Scuderia team, for example. Alan Collin, who is the man who looks after the parts element of the team, very experienced engineer for many, many years, connected to Renault Sports Championships. They've got all these teams running the cars around the world, and therefore, in theory, bringing back the data. But there's just something that seems not to quite knit together to, certainly in long races like this, help them to win. We've seen them win 1 hour races in FIA GT last year, and indeed, of course, across national GT championships, but it's just something seemingly for the longer races that goes against them.
I think initially when they came in, maybe there was an attitude of we're McLaren and nobody can tell us what to do or how to do it. Why would anybody need to tell us? And I think in this discipline, the teams that are doing the winning consistently are teams that have been racing for many, many, many years. And the whole thing, I mean, the likes of the SLS Mercedes, the Audi, the Porsche, to a lesser degree the BMW, that's a slightly more specialised vehicle, but they're fundamentally, they're what I would call turnkey race cars. You turn up and you buy a Porsche, they give you a set of keys, and there's a key in the ignition, and this one here is struggling to get away from the pits after its driver change and pit stop. But in fact, that's the Henrici car.
No, I think that's De Bruer, isn't it, in the Gentleman Trophy car, 58, yeah. It's away now.
But in effect, you go and pick up the car, and I remember when McLaren came in a year ago, and some of the teams that were running them at that stage had gone to a test, and a private entrant rocked up with whatever the Porsche of the day was. Never had run the car till he got to Monza, ran for 3 days non-stop, put it back in the truck and drove it home. And the teams that were running McLaren at that time were having a load of fundamental problems. Most of those fundamental problems have now been addressed, but there are still issues which they've got to get on top of to put the teams that are running these cars in a consistently competitive and reliable position for endurance events of this length.
Well, you want reliability. Look at that Mercedes just going like clockwork. Number 150 is now into the pits, which means that after 526 laps, in has come Richard Lietz, and you're looking at 35, which is 9th, and Wolfgang Reip gets out. And is it time for Lucas Ordóñez to get back in? I'm trying to remember the rotation of the drivers, but the driver change takes place, and the screen has been cleared, and the car will drop down. Engine will fire up, but not just yet, because they've got the tyres to do. The mechanics go around all 4 corners. 2 more tyres handed out. And this is a real fitness program doing this. These mechanics, especially in a 24-hour race, work very hard doing this because they are big, heavy things, those wheels and tyres.
Yeah, well, it's not a 24-hour race for them. It's probably about a 36 or a 40-hour race. Many of them will not have had a very long night on Friday night because they'll have been preparing the car all of Friday and into Friday evening. And, of course, we had that Super Pole qualifying late on Friday evening. So when the cars are released from Parc Fermé, the teams get them back as the Porsche second place comes back onto the circuit. It's a really tough weekend, and as you mentioned, picking up and lowering and fitting and removing wheels and tyres with 2 N2 mechanics to do that for the entire 24 hours. Man, they can rotate the people that they have, but fundamentally you use your best guys because they're the ones that are least likely to make any errors.
Now, even before we had that drive-through penalty to affect the 150 Manthey Porsche, we looked ahead at pit stop strategy and when the cars would be likely to come in, and we worked out that there was going to be a last handful of laps that needed to have a new tank of fuel for the Porsche. In other words, it would have to make one last stop, and that therefore would throw the advantage back the way of the Mercedes. Well, it's kind of become academic now because the Mercedes is leading by a lap anyway, so unless something bad happens to that car, it is on for a race win. But even going back, what, 3 or 4 hours now, the Mercedes was still, even then, in the box seat purely because of the way they were running the car on pit stops. This is number 33, which is 15th, but has been rather disappointing, I'm afraid, in this race. It's 22 laps down. It's the very strong driver combination in the car of Timo Bernhardt, Jörg Bergmeister, who's another previous winner of the event, and Nicolas Lapierre. But the Pro GT by Almera squad, again, given works drivers, but has just not been able to rise to the occasion.
No, it's not. It's been a disappointment because those 3 drivers, Timo Bernhardt, Bergmeister and Lapierre, more so the first 2, Lapierre not really a regular Porsche driver, but outstanding driver in GT. It was one of those entries that you'd have said, well, you look at it at face value, you've got to have it in the top 10, whatever.
Yeah, but again, it shows what a difference a team can make, doesn't it? Because you've got some teams that, there's an example, have got a good car, very, very good drivers, but it's the team perhaps that's the weak link, whereas you look at Manthey, a top team, top drivers, it all fits together nicely. And at McLaren,
well, that's a small private team. Davy Ryan, Von Ryan Racing. It's pretty much a one-man band. Davy and his wife Tina run that team. She's administrative and Davy is technical, and they put together a super little team, and that is the leading McLaren in this race.
Not anymore, sad to say, because it has been overhauled by the Gulf Racing car. We saw Nico Verdonk a little while ago, and he's up into 16th, and now Bruno Senna is down into 18th. Having had that stop. Christopher Mies leaving the pit lane in the Audi you've just seen there to the left in number 2. Here is the BMW that's 5th and the Porsche that's 2nd, powering uphill. Mies versus Colombo, Stefano Colombo for 4th place. The Audi stays ahead then as it heads uphill. That brings down the gap between them, but of course the BMW, when it has its next pit stop, will fall further away from the Audi. And there's the Porsche underlining its pace by being able to pull out lap the BMW going up to Les Combes. It's Patrick Pilet behind the wheel of the Porsche at the moment, doing everything he possibly can to close on the race leading car. But he needs, I'm afraid, something to happen to the Mercedes just to lose it a lap, and then he's back in the game. But otherwise, no chance. It's going to be second at best. There's Frank Kekele, who was on the podium last year. Can't see it happening now in 2013.
No. I think as they were, they were too far back, and it would be something totally unforeseen. But the Porsche certainly in second place, pushing again Patrick Pilar behind the wheel. So on his first flying lap after that stop, and will want to make maximum use of the fresh rubber on the tyres, trying to get through the back markers as quickly as possible. Slightly awkwardly caught coming into Fagno. Does he get through? Yes, he does. As we go back to the 4th place, Audi of Christopher Mies, and this battle of the BMW behind. So the fact is Andre Lotterer in the Audi now, not Christopher Mies.
Yes, they've changed, haven't they, on that last stop was spotted. So Andre Lotterer back behind the wheel. Frank Schnippler sitting it out for another stint in the garage. He certainly did his lion's share of the driving last year. The Von Ryan McLaren then, Chris Goodwin has taken over that car. And we've not seen Chris in modern GT racing for 12 months since he last did this event 12 months ago. He has had a few historic race outings in an ex-Chris Amon McLaren Can-Am car that he has.
Yeah, that's going to give him a really good insight into modern GT racing, isn't it?
But he enjoys himself, no question about that. And this is the Senna, Goodwin and Rob Barr from McLaren. We've not heard from Rob during the course of the race. He's never short of a word or two. And now he's with Jack Nicholls.
Rob, not the race you intended, I imagine.
No, it's been rather emotional, this one. We've had a few little issues with the car, but, you know, it's a 24-hour race, and we've got a plan to make it to the finish. Chris is in the car now for his final double stint, and I, all being well, should have a single to take it to the flag. But as you've seen over the past sort of 5 or 6 hours, we've had fuel pressure issues. We've lost the diffuser on the car after Bruno had an incident this morning with a Porsche when he was run into from behind. And I think it's been a difficult event for McLaren as a whole, you know. But we take from an event such as Spa massive amount of lessons and move forwards.
It must be frustrating because, as you say, they've all been kind of little issues, nothing major, just everything seeming to get in your way. But then, by the same token, to be in a McLaren and still being running is a good effort.
Yeah, it's you've got to look at how lucky we are to be in this kind of situation. I'm driving for Dave Ryan. Dave Ryan ran Ayrton Senna. He ran McLaren Formula One for such a long time. I'm driving with Bruno Senna, who's managed by Chris Goodwin. I work for Chris Goodwin at McLaren. It all just works really nicely, and you know, it's only motor racing, but yeah, we've all tried tremendously hard. But all the team at Von Ryan, it's been a big event, and yeah, we're just keen to make it through the final 90 minutes now.
Has the diffuser been replaced, or are you running without one?
We replaced it, and the replacement fell off. We replaced the replacement, and that too fell off. So we're now running Son's diffuser. Yeah, we decided to sort of go for the super light version for the final couple of hours.
Is that a bit oversteery now then?
A little, yeah. Yeah, Bruno, I think the word he used was terrifying, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it's got a little high-speed oversteer, but yeah, at this stage in the race, we're not pushing.
How much does one of those diffusers cost, you know? Because you managed to get through 4 or 5.
I've got no idea. I'm a humble man from Cornwall. I can't afford that kind of thing. No, I'm sure it'll be thousands. Frightening.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.
Well, we got through a fair few diffusers. The Mercedes parts team are loving every minute of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious with Rob making those comments. And first of all, the lack of diffuser only making a small amount of difference. Well, that in itself tells me that there's something that they need to be attending to around the back of the car. That should make a substantial amount of difference, should make the car a lot less comfortable to drive, a lot more pointy, a lot more downforce in the front. But the other thing is, Rob, talking about issues with the car, I want to know, Rob, to tell me what are the issues, because we're not really getting a lot of feedback from McLaren in general. They tend to keep things very close to their chest. And Rob alluded to a number of issues but didn't specify what they are. So I'll have to have a word with this boy sometime in the future.
That's the racing driver word, isn't it, these days? You don't have problems, you don't have faults, you have issues. And that
it's babble
covers
speak.
Absolutely.
Babble speak.
But it covers a multitude of sins. So you say, I've got an issue. Oh, right, OK. Well, actually, I've been told nothing there. So, yes. I think also, Rob, who understands that it's a good thing to remain on good terms with your manufacturer and your sponsor, isn't going to suddenly let the cat out of the bag and start to blame McLaren or accuse McLaren of not being strong in given areas. Now, in the Gentleman Trophy, Ferraris are first and second. They are 3 laps apart. Fred Bouvier in the red one versus Leonardo Gorini in the yellow one. They go downhill together. 17th and 20th outright now, those cars. And again, we've been talking about this for the last few hours, but it's this slowly catchy monkey sort of situation, isn't it? They've just run to a nice pace. The gentleman drivers have got on with the job. They've kept out of trouble, and there they are in the top 20 overall.
There's nothing magic about it. It's just have a good plan, stick to the plan, don't try to win the race, just let the race come to you. It's different if you're in a pro car, then you've got to go out and make it happen. In this situation, you're going to drive for 22 hours possibly before your final outcome can be determined. And that's what these gentlemen are doing. And to their credit, they have acknowledged their position within this race, within their own particular category. And they've done a great job.
On track, the gap is coming down a little bit, but of course Fred Bouvier can afford to relax his pace. He is 3 laps up, as I say. Fred, who is a very successful and busy businessman in Belgium, but finds the time to go motor racing. He's a regular in what's called the Belgian Racing Car Championship, which is effectively a bit of a hodgepodge of GT cars and touring cars and open-top sports cars. It's kind of grown out of Belcar that used to be very popular many years ago, but when the Spa 24 comes around, Fred Bouvier is always on the grid. He always finds something to go and race in, and he's a useful guy to have on board because he's done so many laps around here. He's an experienced pair of hands who can also pass that knowledge on to his co-drivers. 52 chasing after him, Leonardo Gorini. More people have picked up used tyres, I notice. And actually, if he's just walked uphill with that tyre over his shoulder, he's a fit bloke, because it's a very steep hill, that.
It's a long one, long and steep. It looks flat from that camera angle, but if you look at it from the bottom, where the cars actually come onto the Camel Straight, it is quite an incline, and it's about half a kilometre or more in length from the point where the cars actually end up pointing straight.
There goes 58 Porsche into the braking zone, which is Mark Rostam back behind the wheel of the car. And in 52, it was Gorini, currently in 20th, second in class. And again, it's a situation where too much time has been lost early on. Unless the car ahead has problems, that is as good as it will get in the Gentleman Trophy. Just putting a lap on the 94 Speed Lover Porsche, which is in 32nd place by way of classification, but at least 2 cars ahead, may well be more than that actually, are going no further. So it should, as long as it's done 70% of the winner's distance, be classified higher come the official result. It's Jean-Michel Jérôme, Wim Wilders, Rick Redmond and Philippe Richard, the drivers of that Porsche. And Maximilian Buch is the man behind the wheel of the Mercedes that pounds past once again, climbing up Raidillon. It looks, with an hour and 20 minutes to go, unstoppable, this car.
I mean, you could almost just chamois it off and send it again for another 24 hours. But it's been looked after by all 3 drivers.
There's not a mark on it, there's not been a puncture, there's not been a problem in the pits, it's not run wide. There, I'm afraid to say, is a problem coming into the pits. That is Stefano Colombo, and it's ground to a halt, almost like it's run out of fuel at pit in. But there are also some funny tyre marks on the ground.
Yes, there are. Well, either he locked it up for some reason or the thing locked itself up. But the fact is it's rolled back, so the marshals are not having to push it all the way down the pit lane. And pity for anybody who might come in while this car is being pushed, because instead of doing 50 kilometres per hour, it's barely doing 10 kilometres per hour, and it's quite a long way. Now, I don't know whether this car's pits are on the Grand Prix side or on the
Grand Prix side.
Then at least it's not too big a problem, but you know, uphill, and they're the team having to run down. It is an uphill incline as well.
Indeed, you can't really push a car down the pit lane, but for safety reasons the team will be allowed to get that out of the way. So Stefano Colombo is into the pit lane, and you can see what a heavy car it is, because the marshals are wilting a bit now, and there's a lot of weight to heave around there. But why has the car ground to a halt? Has it run out of fuel? It'll be a big surprise if it has, because this isn't a fuel-thirsty circuit. It looks as though it's something more serious than that. The teams are being warned on the timing screen that the pit entry is blocked. It's being pushed down the pit lane. But if it is something more sinister than fuel, this could be the end of the last BMW.
Well, there were 2 black tyre marks on the racetrack at the point where the BMW was stopped. I wonder, was there something that occurred? The car Colombo coming into the pit lane, he locked it up and then subsequently lost all the power? Or is that just completely spurious and not connected whatsoever?
Very dejected mechanic there, who had a word by opening the door. There's Greg Franchi being interviewed for the circuit public address by Thomas Bastin, the Belgian commentator in the red and black overalls, and the mechanics will be trying to get the car to the team, but it's up to the officials to let them know whether or not, for safety reasons, it can be pushed down the pit lane, or whether it's got to limp there on the starter motor.
And the consequence of this is Audi number 6, Harold Primat, and Oliver Jarvis, amongst others, they're now up into 5th place as a consequence of the BMW in the pit lane. That may have been a scheduled stop. It may have been sort of a panic moment dive into the pit lane because of an issue. So there we see the third. Is this the 3rd place?
Yes,
it is.
That's smoking. That car's got a problem. Look at the smoke coming out of the back of it. That's Cesar Ramos in 3rd place down the pit lane, and it's a rather smoky Ferrari. The BMW look is being pushed to the team, but that's the car that was running 5th with Strife, and now this is the 3rd place car. Is this the end, I wonder? Because there's flame from the back. The extinguishers are quickly there. They had a pit lane fire at Paul Ricard, and now the car that was in 3rd place comes into the pit lane with the engine, one fears, perhaps having let go. And is that the end of the Castle Racing Ferrari?
Well, there's certainly been a fire caused by liquids, most likely. That will be oil, whether it's transmission oil or engine oil, and what a disappointment. That car running competitively in 3rd place, 5 laps down on the lead car, but 1 lap ahead of Andre Lotterer in the number 2 Audi, who will inherit that. There was a 1 lap gap. There is the car that will now go on and take, provisionally, the final podium position.
Indeed. So next question is whether or not the BMW can rejoin, and the Ferrari, because 2 top 6 cars we have just potentially lost in the last few minutes. And as I'm looking down into the pit lane, the BMW is being pushed. This is the Vita 4.1 BMW being pushed past us by 4 mechanics, so they're going to get that back to the team, out of harm's way therefore. But I'm not convinced we're going to see much more of the Ferrari here. The engineers peering into the engine bay, but the body language of the mechanics suggests that after all of this hard work, with an hour and 16 minutes to go, it's all been not for nothing, because they've scored points at 6 and 12 hours, but in real terms that could be the game over, and they've come so far for so little.
Well, when you get so close to the end and then have an issue such as we've just seen with the BMW now, the Ferrari that was running in 3rd place, I mean, that is absolutely just disastrous. And Ferrari, when they dump that amount of extinguisher on it, of course it makes a mess of the engine bay, and you've got to be absolutely certain if they do attempt to get that car running again and get it back on track, that none of the extinguishers has gotten into the very sensitive parts around the throttle bodies. There is the BMW finally back into its pits, and not an awful lot of action around that car.
Indeed, I was just about to say that. Are they going to get it into the box, or are they going to leave it there? It goes up on the jacks, out on the pit apron, trolley jacks to go underneath it, wheel it around and bring it back in. Of course, the other car that's benefiting out of all of this now is 59. Tony Villander will gain one place at the expense of Stefano Colombo, and eventually he'll gain another at the expense of Cesar Ramos if the Kessel Racing Ferrari cannot go back into the race. There is a sad sight. The Vita 4-1 BMW. Is that the last we see of BMW as the same happens for Kessel Racing's Ferrari? That goes into its pit box as well. Up to 6th goes Tony Villander then. Well, we were talking yesterday, John, at the start of the race about how far up the order might you get a Pro-Am car. Matt Griffin, I think, said to you on the grid, he said it to me over the weekend, we'd love to be in the top 6, that's the aim. Well, 6th is where the AF Corsa car is now as the leading Pro-Am entry. That's a great effort. Just under 10 seconds it is ahead of Maurizio Mediani in the next Pro-Am car. Number 6 now, Christopher Haas at the wheel. Here it is 5th. Audi's 4th and 5th, and they should become 3rd and 4th, dependent upon what happens to the Kessel Racing Ferrari.
Well, the Kessel Racing Ferrari is going nowhere because that car is in the garage, and well, there we see it coming in, and the amount of smoke coming from the back of the car, and the odd flame licking out from underneath the engine deck. There you can see just on the right-hand side of the car, the left-hand side of the screen as we look at it, so flame, and that's no doubt a fluid fire caused by either a failure of a brake or a oil hose to engine gearbox getting onto the exhaust systems. And the worst thing is when they dump extinguisher on a car like that, it is a mess to clean it all up.
And again, people stare at the car, they're not leaping on it to try and get it back into the race. I think there's a laptop plugged in, and the same is happening at Vita 4-1. The engineers are downloading data to see what they might be able to do, and it's BMW engineers primarily that are at the moment assessing things more than the team. If you have a look, you'll see the white-shirted, white-overalled BMW mechanics put a stick in it and hit something, seems to be the general premise.
Well, there's something around the centre of the V of the engine, the V8 BMW engine, so using the old shipyard screwdriver to try and get some reaction from that part of the engine where between the V you've got ignition, and to some extent you may have some of the injection equipment as well. But there is the car that has been the single beneficiary, Andre Lotterer, up to 3rd place at the end of this lap as the Ramos Ferrari sits in the garage. And just again, consistency.
An hour and 12 minutes to go, and you've heard drivers saying it's Jack in the pits. It's not over till it's over. And there, within the space of, 25 seconds or so, 2 cars in the top 6 suddenly with problems, and problems serious enough to possibly put both cars out of the race, almost within sight of the flag, so close to the end of the race. There is the scene at Kessel Racing. And it's not a terribly happy scene, it's not a very active scene, sad to say. And this now will put, of course, Andre Lotterer up into 3rd place. He's now already in 3rd as he will come through Blanchimont. So up towards the bus stop, number 2 Audi in 3rd place. Christopher Haas will become 4th. And Andre Lotterer then, despite what Frank Stippel was saying about a podium finish not really being possible, well, it will turn out that way by the look of it. He's too far back to be able to, on pure pace, get any higher up the order, but you just never know what might happen. 2 top teams ahead, 2 very well-drilled cars that have been reliable, but who knows what the last 71 minutes of the race have in store for us. Lotterer turns his way through La Source. Much better showing for him this year than last. He was involved in an accident last year when Adam Christodoulou dived from the pit lane and drove into the Audi and damaged the suspension and the steering and the handling on the car, and it was a very disappointed Andre Lotterer post-event last year. Well, he could well be on the podium this year, the double Le Mans winner. Of course, part of Audi's prototype programme, still very busy with single-seater racing in Japan, and now adapting, why wouldn't he, to GT3 cars very successfully indeed.
Yes, and very much a poster boy these days for Audi with those Le Mans victories. And we're seeing a new generation of younger drivers beginning to cycle through the Audi Le Mans program and being shipped into the GT program as well. And some of the older stalwarts, the Tom Christensens and Alan McNish, will be looking for the next year or so to maybe moving into something else, but not necessarily in motor racing.
Indeed so. We saw Tom Christensen in this event last year. And And the question was being posed, slightly tongue-in-cheek, of Martin Pass, who's Audi Sport UK's press officer. When do we see Alan in this? When's he going to retire then and come into GT3 racing? But with his Le Mans victory this year, I think we're going to see Alan in prototypes for quite a few years to come, yeah? There over the line, Christopher Haase up now to 4th place with the demise of the Kessel Racing Ferrari. So he goes through, moves himself up one further spot, Audi 3rd, Audi 4th. And this car is another one that has worked its way up the order thanks to, in part, reliability, in part also the demise of others. It's never done it on pure pace alone. Number 6, which is the Harold Prima Oliver Jarvis, Christopher Haase entry, just keeps on going. And there it is, in now to the top 4. And Kessel Racing's day looks done, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, once the flame started to lick from the back of the engine compartment to replace whatever the part that caused the fire, which I suspect was an oil line of some description, maybe a hydraulic line. That's a major job, but the bigger job is to clean around the engine compartment from all the extinguishers I've seen in the past, the mess it can make, and it is such a difficult issue to clean up, particularly with the difficulties of access to a GT car, and to make sure that there's nothing that could get into the fuel slides or butterflies, whatever it may be.
As the Audi 5th on the end of the previous lap, now 4th with the demise of the Ferrari. So, Jack, a lot's been happening in the pit lane in the last few minutes, hasn't it?
Yeah, tell me about it. I was at Kessel when the car went up in flames. They wheeled the car into the garage, as you saw. Tried to go in to find out what had happened, but I was very promptly shepherded out by some angry Italians. So I made my way down to the more friendly German pit garage, which was always going to go well. Michael Bartel's very pleasant to me, but he says that he doesn't know what the problem is. They're looking for the problem at the moment. And actually, Colombo has just climbed out of the car. They're all shaking hands. So it looks to me as though this car may be out of the race. The kind of body language of the mechanics and driver. Yeah, we're seeing it on picture now, Jack. In fact, you're absolutely right. It's that sort of commiseration type handshake, isn't it? Of well done, guys, a job well done. The big frame of Dave Lister, the photographer for BMW, in the background there, who I'm afraid is going to have some photographs of rather unhappy people now. The BMW engineers are still staring into the engine bay, but they've come so close. And we've lost a BMW, we've lost a Ferrari. The only beneficiary really out of this is Audi, although you could argue that Ferrari profits to an extent, even though 59 was still leading Pro-Am anyway. It's higher up the order overall, 6th now, it'll become 5th before much longer. Nissan benefits. Lucas Ordóñez is now 9th, but he's going to go 7th with these 2 retirements ahead of him.
Yeah, and that's got to be a great result for Nissan and for those GT Academy drivers to finish not just inside the top 10, but to potentially finish as high as 7th. And considering the difficulties the team faced in the opening laps when Alex Buncombe had that unexpected failure coming into Eau Rouge, the car hit the barriers, we saw very heavily indeed. And there's always the thought in the back of your mind, was it a finger problem, or was it something that was a mechanical issue that we couldn't anticipate? But the car has run flawlessly ever since.
Well, we've been seeing the disappointed Vita 4-1 team. The man, of course, who heads it all is a very disappointed Michael Bartels.
Michael, just over an hour to go, but it looks as though the car's out. What's happened?
It looks like that the race is over. There's something on the engine, which is impossible to fix here. And of course it's very hard to believe, so close before the end and still in a good position for a possible podium, but the race for us is over.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
And a very disappointed Michael Bartels. He has experienced every emotion at this race. He's won it 3 times. He's been on the top step of the podium. And, of course, in those days, he was driver as well as team owner. Here he is just as a team owner these days, and he looks at a car that is going no further.
Yeah, and I think the issue maybe is most disappointing for the team and Michael Bartels is that whatever it was, it occurred without any notice. There was nothing that they were able to see on the telemetry or any information coming from the cockpit that there might have been a problem, that they could have brought the car in and tried to address it. It just occurred and it was terminal.
Indeed so, and that's the scene at Kessel. Dejection. Everybody walking around that bit slower, heads slightly bowed, aren't they? And that's a car out of the race, and this is the Vita 4-1 garage, where now it's not the team engineers that are doing the research, it is the BMW Motorsport engineers who are trying to understand exactly what it is that has stopped the car so close to the end of the race.
Well, if it's internal in the engine, they're not going to really see an awful lot. All they can do is maybe remove the spark plugs and stick an endoscope down and see what they see. But whatever it was, it stopped the car in the pit lane, and it had to be pushed all the way up the incline of the Grand Prix pit lane to the garage, where it was then bodywork removed. And once again, this lead car, just peerless as it comes through Eau Rouge and over Radion, looks as good as it did at the basically opening lap of the race. And right now with Maximilian Buch, who's been really an outstanding GT driver all season in this car, and his rating no doubt is going up rapidly.
Yes, indeed. He's not done very much long distance racing, but he's excelled here. Shows you can't judge a book by its cover or something like that, doesn't it?
Well, I've used the book joke a few times, and I'm glad to hear you got one as well, David.
There you go. It's taken 20-something hours, but we've got there. And with Bernd Schneider on board as well, he will have been happy to pass on some experience to the two young drivers, but they've not really had to learn a great deal, because the talent in both the Maximilians, Buch and Goetz, is there, isn't it? It's raw talent.
The talent's there, that's first of all fundamental. But what you've got then is the mix of the experience of Bernd Schneider, who's won 24-hour races. He's won in Dubai in this car, he won at the Nürburgring, and principally this car. Knows it inside out, but has got the experience and the knowledge and just the common sense to give good advice to his two younger teammates.
He's going to have another go behind the wheel by the look of it. And it's Bernd Schneider going to get himself ready to go.
Well, he will do the final stint with just an hour and 4 minutes of the race remaining. So when Maximilian Buch comes in, it'll be Bernd Schneider jumps into the car, and he will take the car to the conclusion of this 24 hours of Spa. And imagining he's going to have a fairly nice final hour in this car that he shepherded from the minute he got into it late on Saturday evening. And his first flying lap was a stunning lap, and he's been nothing less than stunning in every time he's been in the car.
What makes him so good?
It's a combination of a lot of ability, natural ability, confidence, belief, but experience. And he's been here, done it. The fact is that he is extremely fit. He looks after himself well. He's not, as some drivers do when they retire, let's say, let their bodies go. He's kept himself in extremely good condition.
And one of his co-drivers is Maximilian Goetz, who will stand by, cross his fingers, and hope his car comes home a winner. He's with Jack.
So Max, Bernd's about to go out for the final stint, and it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now we come into our last pit stop. Hopefully everything is working quite well. The crew did a really good job through the last stints, and so hopefully the last pit stop will be good.
We just saw you chatting to Bernd. What were you saying? Last minute advice?
Yeah, we spoke about that. We survive the car here. We let the car survive here, and so we go quite easy and be careful in the next 60 minutes, and we will see what's happened. We saw Ferrari burned, and BMW from Vita 4-1 had a problem, so everything can happen, and also in the last 60 minutes.
Would you like to be doing the last stint, or are you happy to avoid the pressure?
No, I'm happy because we did all of us. We did 8 hours in total in the car, each of us. So it's quite a lot. And for Bernd, it's something historic. Maybe he could win all the 24-hour races this year, except 24 hours of Le Mans. So it would be great. So I keep finger crossed until to the end, and we will see.
Thank you.
Dubai, the Nürburgring already won. 12 hours at Bathurst won by Bernd Schneider. 24 hours of Spa. As we keep saying, he's won it before, back in the late Group A era, when there were still Ford Sierra RS 500s doing the winning, and the Spa 24 hours had become very much the must-do touring car race. But as the ETC collapsed, and so it had a fair few years, really a decade or so, of being a general all-comers touring car race, and then GT cars came on board. The race has become very much worth winning once again, and Bernd Schneider has won it once. As the car pits then, ready for him to take over, it was with Win Percy and Gianfranco Brancatelli, who were also, of that period, two star touring car racers. Bernd then was very much the young pup. Well, not now, he's the old pro, but he's going to bring the car home, seemingly for a race win.
And I mean, another factor which I think is interesting is we are seeing this great growth of GT racing both in Europe and around the world, but also it's sort of a decline in touring car racing around the world. And certainly, I mean, I think this is superb because the cars are quick cars. The problem is with touring cars, as we know them now, certainly world touring cars, they're not quick, they're not exciting, and they don't make much noise.
But also the race formats have changed, hasn't it? Touring car racing has gone to short, sharp, TV-friendly races. They're not built for endurance races anymore. The only ones that are those in Australia for Bathurst in 1,000-kilometre supercar
I mean,
races.
that's a one-off for Australia. It's a bit like the kangaroo. It's a uniquely Australian creation.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, the days of long-distance touring car races in Europe largely gone. You do get some touring cars, of course, in the Nürburgring 24 hours, which is a very different type of event. And this is, all being well, the last pit stop for the Mercedes.
A brand new set of rubber going on for Bernd Schneider. That'll be a nice little experience. And I'll take a little note of his first flying lap on these tyres.
Well, don't forget, he's got the best lap of the race already. I'm just thinking, can he go even quicker?
Absolutely, that's the very thought I had. He's got a 2:21.861, which he set on lap 467. And we were on lap 540, so he was well in. It was probably in the best part of the 21st hour when he set that lap. So now we will leave the pit lane, and that's the long way down as we see the Porsche coming up through Eau Rouge, as Bernd Schneider was probably rounding and then making the trip down the European pit lane. Lights flashing on the Porsche as it makes its way past one of the Mercedes, and Patrick Pilet still pushing as hard as he can too. 24.6 was his last lap. A little bit maybe premature to be congratulating it. Well, it'll be just a great pit stop. That's what they're doing. They're not congratulating themselves on a victory, but on a great pit stop.
And great pit stops plural, because in theory that's their work done now. They shouldn't have to have that car back in again, and as long as it gets through post-event scrutineering, there have been occasions in other 24-hour races where the winning car's then been excluded post-events, but for now it looks as though everything is done for the mechanics. That lap of Bernd Schneider's a 2:21.8, best lap of the race. Last year Maxime Martin did the fastest lap, a 2:19.7. So Bernd Schneider may be the quickest man this year, but last year's cars, when it was dry, able to go just a touch faster. Bernd Schneider then is back on track, and as he starts lap 5:41, he makes his way up towards Les Combes, and it looks as though we are heading for a Mercedes victory. Porsche second, Audi third, Audi fourth, Ferrari fifth, Ferrari sixth, Nissan seventh, eighth on distance, Ferrari of Cesar Ramos, but you can ignore that because that will be a retirement. So that's going to give eighth to Pro Speed in the Porsche, Maxime Soulet. Up to ninth will be number 18 Mercedes, Adam Christodoulou at the wheel. That's good for Adam because he was excluded from the race last year. He wasn't allowed to continue driving after he'd been involved in the accident, as he went for the pit lane and drove into the side of Andre Lothra. So it's a good comeback for him. 11th on classification, Stefano Colombo's BMW. We know that is out. So into the top 10 will come Sergej Zlobin with another of the SMP Racing Ferraris. So there's still some shuffling to do with 57 3/4 minutes to go.
And interestingly, in these closing moments rather than hours, that the Ferraris, which have not featured strongly overall with the exception of the car, the Ferrari that is now on the pitch, the Cesar Ramos car, they have not featured in the top 10. They're now coming through as the field, two of the lead cars out of this race with an hour to go. And some of the Gentleman Trophy drivers and the Pro-Am Ferraris now beginning to not flex their muscles. There's a little bit of a running wide, picked up a load of dirt and dust on the outside. So Ferrari's coming eventually into the bottom of the top 10. Look, the cloud, well, is that going to be the final? 62% humidity is 24.3. It's getting slightly warmer. Humidity's pretty static, as pretty much air pressure is as well.
You know what's going to happen, don't you? It's going to rain just as you get to the podium, ready to talk to the winners. So, is the rain going to come? Bernd Schneider then, he's on his out lap. He will start the first flying lap very shortly, and let's see what he can do, because it's always when he first gets into the car that he seems to be so fired up that it's a quick one. Here we go. He's over the timing line. Bernd Schneider down to La Source.
Yes, well, a brand new set of Pirelli tyres will always give up its best performance on your first flying lap, because that's just the nature of tyres in general, and Pirelli are no different to any other manufacturer. So this is the lap where Bernd Schneider has the potential to go out and better the current fastest lap he achieved in lap 467. And assuming he gets a clear run through, he got a good run up to La Source. Way wide. He really pushed the Mercedes through Rouge over Radio on this his last run, the last run of everybody, 55 minutes remaining.
So he heads uphill, and as he goes now through the first sector, he's quite a long way down there compared to the best of anybody in the race, like 4.5 seconds slower than the best in that sector. Maybe for the first time, really, we're seeing a really conservative Ben Schneider. So he will be under instruction, of course, from the team, and he'll know this himself, just to bring home this car. He doesn't have to be a hero now. They've got a lap to grace, and the last thing they need in the final hour is a problem.
But you know, the car will feel fantastic with the new set of rubber on, and everything will be so easy. You'll not have to run curbs aggressively. He did run aggressive coming out of Eau Rouge over the radio, a little bit more conservative coming down the hill into Pujo. So, well, maybe he's decided that I've got the lead of this race by a lap. I don't need to do anything. Yeah. You know, I've got the fastest lap of the race. Why do I need to go out and try and improve on it? Purely just for a well-being factor.
He goes through the pith path, and the 1989 Spa 24-hour winner accelerates off now down towards campus. You see the sand on the left and right of the road there, which has soaked up the liquid spilt by the cars in the earlier accident. I was saying how slow he was in the first sector. The second sector is a 67. That is 2.5 seconds.
Yeah,
there.
He's not.
As I say, he's backed off.
He's been backed off. But yeah, absolutely, he's doing the right thing. He's not going out and doing it for himself. He's driving for his team.
So the Mercedes then making its way up now to the end of the lap. This is lap 5:42 for Ben Schneider. And all he's got to do is just bring it home, and it's going to be seemingly a Mercedes win after a very lively Spa 24-hour race. And as we go into this last hour, let's just have a look back at some of the highlights of the race to date. A 65-strong grid. Lots of fans ready for the start of the 65th running of the Spa 24 hours. They were scattered not just in the stands opposite, but around in the forests as well. Red Foo, who was performing the concert on Saturday night, was on the grid having a look at the cars. Bas Leinders was hoping that this would be a good result for the Belgian Mark VDS Racing team. Into the pole-sitting car got Stefan Mucker. The safety car led them away, and as the lights went out, Alessandro Pierguidi had this incredible moment at Eau Rouge. He actually caught the spin, he carried on, but he sent cars scattering left and right. He lost places in the process of all of that. Good battle early on between Alvaro Parent and Max Goetz, the two of them running together. Alex Buncombe had this big accident, though, at Eau Rouge on lap 13. As he ploughed off into the tyres, that brought out the safety car. And the 84 Mercedes pitted, which, as it has turned out, was an inspired decision. It got them away from everybody else on strategy. It gave them a nice clear pit lane for the bulk of the time, and it also helped to get the race lead. Jos Menton, though, was an early retirement after he crashed the Lamborghini of Blancpain Racing. Jelmer Berman was ready for his stint behind the wheel of the BMW. And troubles for McLaren started with Hexis with an overheating car, but all was good for Mark van der Straten's fleet of BMWs. Maxime Martin handed over to Bas Leinders. The car blasted back down the pit lane. And then it was time for Nick Katzberg, who had briefly got the race lead, to come in as well. As he rejoined, the battles continued out on track. We had car number 4, Henri Moser at the wheel, going strongly. But the Mercedes, even in the early stages of the race, was a threat. Because of its early splash and dash for fuel behind the safety car, it had lost places. But in terms of speed, it was going strongly, and as everybody else made their pit stops, of course, it rose up the order. Number 14, BMW, an early retirement. Broken engine for Jens Klingmann, retirement just being avoided by Ferrari. Carl Wendlinger dispensed with Marco Schelp. The ARC Bratislava Porsche into the concrete wall, into retirement. A great move, though, by Patrick Pilet round the outside of two back markers, and Jelmer Berman gave him the race lead at Les Combes. The Porsche was ahead. The Mark VDS team even grudgingly accepted that was a good move. Then it was time for Jelmer Berman to pit. The Porsche started to build up a small advantage. Down the pit lane came 150. The Manthey Racing Porsche. Patrick Pilet gave it back to Mark Lieb. And the battle was becoming Porsche versus BMW, with the Mercedes, as they say, there or thereabouts, moving up and down the order depending on who pitted when. As Lieb rejoined the race, so Berman got back ahead of him, but it wasn't long before the Porsche was on the tail once again of the BMW and heading down towards Pouin. Mark Lieb managed to use the traffic to his advantage. Berman got stuck behind the slower Ferraris. The Porsche dive-bombed him on the inside, and through went Mark Lieb. Under orange skies, the race headed to the darkness, and the cars ploughed on into the night. Battles continued as ever across the three classes, and the leaders having the perennial problem of trying to work their way through traffic. We lost quite a few cars in the night though, but going strongly, at least up to the 6-hour mark, was number 3 BMW. Number 4 led at the 6-hour mark and therefore got the maximum points on offer for that stage of the race. Points also at 12 hours as well as the finish of the race itself. Johnny Adam, though, had a problem with the front splitter. That had some carbon fibre come loose and lacerate a tyre. The Beach Dean Aston was in the pit lane. Lights on around the track, lights on the cars. They pounded on into the night, and Xavier Marson was getting ready for his next stint behind the wheel of the Pro Speed Porsche. Fireworks, concerts, party time off track. The Spa 24 Hours isn't just a race, it is an event in the true sense of the word. And increasingly, year on year, more is done to look after the fans who don't just want to watch cars. BMW number 4 then led going into the night. It didn't survive the darkness hours. An electrical problem, possibly an alternator failure, say the team put that out. And as the barbecues were lit ready for breakfast and dawn broke, it did so over a stranded number 3 BMW. Out went the lead car from the team. 75 was heading for the pit lane. Mark Henrici had a puncture. The car had also had a small fire in the cockpit for some odd reason during the night. And so what that gave us was a new look top of the leaderboard. Mercedes versus Porsche. There was a spin for Daniel De Bruyne coming out of Speaker's Corner. As around went the Écurie Ardennes Porsche. Two very brave marshals moved that out of the way. And so the race continued. The Vita 4-1 BMW had another tyre change. The car was still running strongly at this stage within the top 6. The SMP Racing team busy cycling through driver changes as well as refuelling cars. And the Ferrari fans well catered for. Moving up into the top 3 was the Castle Racing Ferrari. Cesar Ramos taking over from Davide Rigo. A new set of tyres put on to the championship leading Ferrari as the race lead battle continued. Mercedes moving itself back ahead of Porsche as they plunge downhill. One of the Black Falcon Mercedes had shed bodywork out on track. Another brave marshal getting that out of the way. The 88 Von Ryan McLaren had dramas with fuel pressure problems, and then it was hit by a Pro Speed Porsche which damaged the diffuser on the Bruno Senna car. He got it back in, they replaced the diffuser, that fell off, they replaced it again, that fell off also. Team WRT had lost a couple of its cars to damage in the night. They had a decreasing number to worry about, whereas on board 35 Nissan, Wolfgang Reip had the digital display panel drop down. That was a bit of a distraction to him, but he continued running strongly in the top 3 in class. Battle on track between Vita 4-1 and Castle Racing. Ultimately, neither car would finish, but it was a good scrap at the time. 4th place, which Ferrari was able to take going into La Source. The Gulf Racing mechanics had had a pretty long night, limited amounts of sleep. And as the Mercedes that had led rejoined, it did so on the tail of the Porsche. The two cars ran together with Bernd Schneider at the wheel of the Mercedes for his next stint. Into the pit lane, though, came the number 150 Porsche. Schneider was getting himself ready, having done single stints, whereas Maximilian Goertz was double stinting in that car, and Bernd Schneider, having won the event in 1989, looking perhaps for another victory this year. Audi 2 of André Lotterer had a brake pad and disc change. It rejoined, it spun, and it wouldn't get going. Some electrical issue making it kangaroo-like as it tried to rejoin. The system was reset. The car now going as strongly as ever. Xavier Marston's Porsche into the top 10. Problems for the 53 Sport Garage Ferrari, as that, with an engine problem, headed back to the pit lane. With Pirelli getting through a fair number of tyres, 84 came through the pit lane. Bernd Schneider took the car over, and as he did so, he joined in behind Mark Lieb. He made his move, going down towards the pit path. Right round the outside went the Mercedes, and as the dust flew, it was all done on the dirty part of the road. It was brave stuff, but then the race lost Louis Machiels with this big accident after a tyre went down, heading into Eau Rouge. He was okay, a bit bruised and battered. Louis Machiels limped away. The car out of the race, the safety car deployed once again. Back into the race went the Manthey Racing Porsche, but it was delayed at the end of the pit lane, and that meant it lost a lap to the leading Mercedes. It got the lap back as the safety car peeled off, but Mark Lee made the move, weaving his way through the traffic before he'd got to the safety car line. A consequence of that was a drive-through penalty, and that lost the Porsche even more time than it could ill afford to lose. Enzo Ida completely misjudged this move against Ian Dockrell, a monster accident as the two cars smashed into the tyre wall down at campus. That was the 5th safety car period of the race. It bunched up the field once more, and then Wim Mulders was tagged out of the way by JRM Nissan on the restart. Bob Neville looking nervous as number 35 Nissan continued on its way in class. Stefano Colombo's BMW ran a touch wide, and that enabled number 2 Audi to come up alongside it and snaffle 4th place away. Christopher Meese at the wheel doing a good job. Disappointment from the BMW mechanics, but more would come as the car ground to a halt at the end of the pit lane. A disappointed Greg Franchi looked on as mechanics and marshals tried to get the car out of the way, but there was nothing else to do but retire the car. And Kessel Racing, engine problems, smoke and flame, and the car that had led the championship coming to Spa, a retirement, and that seriously affects life going into the final round of the championship at the Nürburgring. That all helped Audi up to 3rd place now, the number 2 car of Andre Lotterer. But as we're into the last 45 minutes of the race, Mercedes leads, and for the last stint, a new tank of fuel, a new set of Pirelli slicks, and a Bernd Schneider back behind the wheel. Mechanics can celebrate. They've done all their pit stops if everything goes to plan, and so now we are 44 minutes and change away from the end of the race. Let's just have a quick look at the classification once again. It's the leading Mercedes from the leading Porsche, the top 2. Then you've got the brace of Audis, one from Team WRT, the other from Phoenix. AF Corsa's Ferrari leading Pro-Am, 5th overall. S&P Racing's Ferrari, 6th overall, 2nd in class. And 3rd in Pro-Am is the Ordonez Mardenborough Petzera Wright Nissan. Henrici Martin Soule up to 8th. Adam Christodoulou's Mercedes is 9th, and you can see number 44 is classified 10th, but ignore that, it's going no further. It's not yet been officially retired, nor has the 26 BMW, but we've heard from the team that it's going no further. The Gentleman Trophy being led by number 20, which is the Sofrev Autosport Promotion car of Blanchemin, Bobalik, Guélard and Fred Bouvy. 2nd in the class is 52 Ferrari, which is down in 20th overall, run by Sport Garage. 3rd in class is Treble 1, 21st overall now. Going through that classification, there are still some that are shown because they've not officially retired but are going no further, sad to say. We started with 65 cars. In terms of the number that are going to be classified, I would offer you now around about 27. It has certainly been a race of attrition, high attrition at that, and for the top 2 teams, very little has gone wrong. For Porsche, apart from a drive-through penalty, we know about a power steering problem, but for the HTP Motorsport Mercedes, it has all gone like clockwork. All of these cars' retirements, some through damage, some through mechanical problems. And the very first retirement of the race, which was the DKR Engineering BMW, just 6 laps done before the fuel pressure went AWOL. So with 42 minutes to go, the fans watch what seems to be a Mercedes win. Bernd Schneider, who's won the event before. Mercedes, of course, as a brand, has won the Spa 24 Hours, but not since 1964, when Robert Kravitz and Gustave Gosselin were the winners. And the Mercedes SLS AMG GT3, the type of car that has won already this year the 24-hour races in Dubai and at the Nürburgring, the 12 hours at Bathurst, powering now up towards the line. Goes through down towards La Source. We have got 150 into the pit lane, so that's the last pit stop seemingly for Patrick Pilet. You shouldn't have to come in again, they'll be able to go to the end on that. 71 Ferrari, I've talked about being 2nd in Pro-Am, Maurizio Mediani, but it's got a stop-go penalty for a driving time infringement. One of the drivers has gone over the limit, permitted amount. 3¼ hours is the maximum in one go. And there's a total as well for individual drivers, so it might be a cumulative or it might be the actual 3 stints put together, if you like. So whether it's one offence from the most recent triple stinting or too much time overall added together, I know not, but it is a driving time infringement for 71 and a stop-go penalty.
And you wonder which of the four drivers that would have been.
Not sure. Mika Salo had been in it most recently.
Yeah, I mean, he was
seemingly for a while.
Yeah, well, it has been for a while, but I mean, he was the driver that looked out of the car quite breathless. Again, just an error that the team have made not to keep an eye on the time each driver is spending in the car, and an unnecessary penalty after a lot of hard work by everybody, drivers, team, whomever.
A flash of the headlights from Christopher Haas's car. He's being told about respecting the track limits at Blancpain. There is the car with the Damocletian stop-go penalty hanging over it. It is Maurizio Mediani at the wheel, but that stop-go is going to lose it time, but it's 3 laps up on the car that's chasing it, so it won't lose it any places in real terms. It'll cost it a chance of winning the class, but it won't be caught by the Nissan behind.
No, there was an opportunity. I mean, if there had been a problem for the Tony Villando Ferrari, which currently leads the Pro-Am category,
heading down towards Podium, there is 71 Ferrari.
Car 71 gets a stop-and-go penalty for a driving time infringement. Car 71 a stop-and-go penalty for a driving time infringement.
The voice you've heard is that of Bernard Cottrell, the race director. He's put it on the screen for the teams, but he's also doing it over the radio channel as well. So if nobody's responding to it from the timing screen, they've heard it in their ears as well. He can talk to the teams that way as well as from the screen. And so we now know as well that 71 for sure has got to make this stop and go penalty. We're not told whether it's a very long stop, whether it's just a simple stop and instantly go, or whether it's a timed stop-go, but either way, it's got to come in.
It's got to come in, and of course the penalty is as much the stop-go as it is the time spent coming in the very long first part of the pit lane, and then the even longer second part of the pit lane. That's the penalty, but overall it's not going to make any difference to the outcome of their final overall position. They're currently in 6th place. They're not likely to be challenged by Adoniath in the Nissan. It's 3 laps down. So it's a shame, but that's the responsibility of the management side of a team. And if they fail to, as we look at one of the Ferraris, was around the back of it.
That's car 20, Fred Bouvi is in, and that's the car that's leading the Gentleman Trophy, and there's work at the back. There is a hammer. There is noise, and we are led to believe it is a jammed starter motor they're trying to sort out, and in theory this should be its last pit stop. They need to get the car away. Now it has got in hand 3 laps over the class opposition, so they have a bit of time in hand to try and sort this, but what they certainly don't want to do is have to try to replace the starter motor. They just want to get the car fired up, but it's not looking great, this, is it?
No, it's not, and especially now we're sort of 38 minutes remaining in this race, everybody tired and maybe not thinking quite so clearly, and of course it's very hot around the back of these cars. They've opened up the engine deck to let some air get in, and also have an inspection smoke coming out of that Ferrari as well.
And that's the second place car in class.
Identical to the car that was in 3rd place on the right-hand side of the engine deck. Now, is that a similar problem, or is it just something, is that steam rather than a... it seems to have stopped, but nevertheless, that was virtually identical to what we saw from the Ferrari that retired, the Ramos car, the number 44, which of course now is classified down in 12th but not running.
Indeed so Thierry Pragno at the wheel of 52, he may have a problem. This is the car that's 3rd in the class, and it is Gaetano Ardanio Perez, the Venezuelan ex-Maserati Trofeo racer, behind the wheel of it. We saw him in Blancpain and indeed in GT3 Europe last year. Engine cover is down on the Ferrari. Does that mean it's going to fire up, or is it going for the box? They're going to rock the car, try and free it. Does that help?
No, it is solid. It is not moving. It's not releasing. And, oh, there we got it now. Don't push start it. Well, that's what they've done.
Big round of applause from the rest of the team to say, well done, guys. You've got the car back into the race. Is that the last problem they're going to have, then, with 37 minutes and counting on the clock? There's the Sofrev ASP Autosport Promotion team. It's the squad run by Jérôme Policon, himself a very fast racing driver who doesn't do too much driving these days, busy running the team, looking after the customers. There he is, in fact. It's the sea of mechanics parts for Jérôme Policon. So 36.5 minutes to go. What else has the race got to offer us now? Class leaders with problems. There's the 2nd place car that has come in from Gentleman Trophy, Thierry Pragno at the wheel of it. There's not the same commotion around the engine bay as there was for Kessel Racing's Pro Cup car, so it's allowed to rejoin. Just fuel put on board that car as number 20 sets off down the pit lane once more. It'll go past the hit out through the timing beam in a moment, and then once more head uphill, still with Fred Bouvy behind the wheel. So the Belgian driver is going to bring home the car on home soil.
Yep, and he comes up and virtually gets back onto the track, and the Porsche's got to move slightly out to the left, and then the Ferrari gain access and space. And so that car, moment of drama when the starter motor was engaged, it wouldn't disengage to enable it to then refire the engine, so they actually managed to bump start it. I'm sure they would claim that the starter motor was being engaged at the same time, as often has happened. So the other Ferrari and the gentleman drivers makes its way down pit lane, and waiting to see stop-go penalty, drive time. It doesn't give it again. It looks like it's just going to be a stop and go penalty rather than a timed stop penalty.
However, that message has been on the screen for a few laps now.
You've got 3 laps to respond.
They need to respond sooner rather than later, because otherwise the penalty will increase, won't it?
Very much so. So, ought to be coming in this lap.
It's the same team that had 2 cars in Superpole and got neither of them out at the allotted time. So there is a weak link within SMP Racing over what you might call general admin, and one would hope that they've mucked up here on admin in terms of having a driver in the car for too long. So that's again proof that they're just not quite on top of the game.
Pit lane's not doing the job it should be doing.
Exactly, and now they've not yet responded to this message that's been on the screens. Well, there it is, 71, as you say, Maurizio Mediani. He should come in this time, really. There's no point staying out there, just get the penalty out of the way. He runs all 4 wheels off.
He's driving off the track at Blancpain. He's got 4 wheels off the track, so he's got to drive through a penalty. Here he comes into the pit lane. So let's look and see whether this is just simply drive up to the end of the pit lane, stop, and then he's waved to go again. But he may well have to be advised to respect the track limits at Blancpain.
Here it is again, absolutely flat out, over the white line, onto the green bit, and that wasn't just over the white line by a millimetre or two, that was fully off the road.
That was the genuine case.
Yes. Down the pit lane he goes then.
There should be a box up at the top of the pit lane for him to pull into.
That was the team.
That's the team for the penalty. He's got to drive up to the end of the pit lane.
So again, you see the team need to be on the radio saying you go down to the end of the pit lane, you find the stop-go penalty box, you serve it there.
Okay, maybe the stop-go penalty box is now at the back. This is the second pit lane, so it may well be down at the very bottom there. That's where the car should, in theory, come to a standstill.
The stop-go penalty box is in front of scrutineering,
which is normally, if you use the Formula 1 pits, the end garage, but of course we're using both pits, so whether they say it is at the end of this pit lane, and let's see what the Ferrari does, or is it just simply going to be seen as a drive-through penalty? Making his way down at all the 50 kilometers per hour, and not so far looking to pull over to the right, which is what you'd expect to do. He's driven out of the pit lane.
I think he's missed it.
I don't know. I do not know what he's done. He's driven in the pit lane, and he's driven the length of the 2 pit lanes, and he's driven back out onto the track, and we understood it was a stop-go penalty of no determined amount of time. I wonder what investigation will be instigated now.
Confirmation from race control that he has indeed served the stop. It was in front of scrutineering, which is at the pit-in end of the pit lane, so it's the first garage you get to. He came in, stopped, and then we didn't see that on the cameras.
No, we didn't see that.
No,
I didn't, and that's why there's confusion as to as the third place Audi in the pits for its final stop.
He did do it. Now, what is also happening from the officials is that number 20, the Fred Bouvy Ferrari, is under investigation for the car release. We saw that push start.
Push start, which I was uncomfortable about, because the starter motor was engaged. They couldn't release it, so they bump started the car, and that's, I suspect, what the car is now under investigation for, because as far as I'm aware, the car has to start under its own power. That means its own battery and its own starter motor, and a push start is, in my view, David's furiously looking through the regulations regarding what happens when a car fails to start under its own power in the pit lane. Third place Audi, leaves the pit lane and has got an advantage of a lap over the sister car, the Haas car. As we look at that, Audi flashing its lights furiously at the Von Ryan McLaren, which is not to say running at its full potential. We know that the car lost its diffuser because of the damage and attack from the rear by Porsche earlier in the event, and then the replacement apparently disappeared as well. And according to Rob Barth, it doesn't seem to make a huge amount of difference. But here's the issue.
Well, let's find out, if we can, from race control about this.
Race control message, car 20 under investigation for the pit lane release.
Okay, so that confirms what has been told to the teams on the screen. It's under investigation. I'm still wading through the regulations to try and find a line that says a car must leave the pits on its own without a push start, and I haven't found the line yet. So it's under investigation. The stewards will have a look as well.
I would imagine that any release that involves the car not starting under its own starter motor, under its own battery, in other words, it doesn't have a push start, as we clearly saw there for a second time, would be in contravention of the regulations. But David's got the regulations here. There are many pages of it, and he's about to read it out.
Well, what I can say is that the car must be pushed into the garage by not more than 4 mechanics. At the end of the operations, the car must be pushed out of the garage and restarted in accordance with Article 103, all right? Article 103 says the car's engine may be restarted only when the car is about to join the race and is in contact with the ground on all 4 wheels. What it doesn't do is talk about whether mechanics can or can't give it a push. So there might be another regulation I need to find about that, but the stewards are going to have a look at this as well.
Yeah, and they will, and I've no doubt that they will say that that was in contravention of a regulation, whatever number, paragraph, subparagraph. Push starts like that in the pit lane normally, in my experience, are not permitted. They did it. It was the only way they could fire the engine up. The starter motor appeared to be solidly jammed. It may now be released, having bump started it. That might have kicked the starter motor out of the locked position.
You know, in this Big Brother world in which we live, where people see everything,
drives me nuts.
Well, the Sofrev team boss has had a go at our cameraman, saying, you shouldn't have filmed that, you got us into trouble. And the answer came back, well, you shouldn't have done it, should you? So I think the team realises that it probably did push the envelope a little bit here.
They were trying to rock the car to get the starter to release. And what they did, you might say the starter did release, and maybe they could say, well, the driver, we were pushing the car, but he actually fired it up in the ignition. So, I mean, there's lots of opportunities to mitigate your case here.
Of course, let's just speculate for a moment. It might be that if a penalty were to come, it might be a drive-through, not the end of the world, with still a cushion of 3 laps. But were it to be a stop-go, and the car has a problem getting away, as long as the engine doesn't get switched off, it's not too bad.
I mean, but stop-go doesn't mean you've got to turn the engine off.
No, but if you were to stall, or that's the last thing they need. That's the last thing they need. Anyway, we'll see what the stewards decide, and hopefully that will all come before the end of the race. It would be horrible to have a retrospective penalty, wouldn't it? We've seen 84, which is the leading Mercedes. Bernd Schneider is at the wheel. This is the car that leads the total 24 hours of Spa. It has done 552 laps, and a win seemingly is 27.5 minutes away. That's all now. The car heads through Blancpain up towards the bus stop. Bernd Schneider behind the wheel, turning his way then up into the chicane, really, at the end of the lap. This configuration, nothing like the bus stop, which is how it got its name because of its shape years ago when Gordon Spice so christened it. Mark Lieb pressing on in second place. The Manthey Racing Porsche. Manthey Racing, a very successful team. Good to have the squad in the Blancpain Endurance Series, and one would hope that they might come and do the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometres as well. I know that Porsche has put a lot of effort into this event because it wants to try and get a good result for 50 years of the Porsche 911, but one would hope that something might be done also on German soil for the last round of the championship. And here, third overall and Pro Cup, André Lotterer at the wheel of the Audi that he shares with Christopher Mies and last year's winner Frank Steppler. And this is a car that, as John has been making the point, has got up the order by stealth, if you like, by perseverance, not on sheer speed, but as others have had problems, and this car has run pretty much okay. It has got up there. We've had a spin from André Lotterer, but largely the car has got through without any real dramas. This is the car that's fourth. Christopher Haase is behind the wheel, powering his way up Radion now. And the team manager of car 20 Ferrari is heading to the stewards. So the story ain't over yet. And if you're going to the stewards, it has got to be, I think, to accept some sort of censure for that release from the pit lane. This is the fourth place car then. Christopher Haase turning his way now up through Les Combes. He's back on the power, going down towards Bruxelles. And you've got Audis therefore from two different teams, WRT and Phoenix, within the top four. And this car trying to catch Andre Lotterer. They're on the same lap thanks to a recent pit stop from Lotterer. And down through the left-hander at Speaker's Corner goes car 6, Christopher Haase. He runs in fourth place overall. Fifth is the car that leads the Pro-Am category, and it is 59. Tony Villander is at the wheel of the Ferrari that is being shared with Matt Griffin, Duncan Cameron and Alex Mortimer. It's AF Corsa leading the way. That in itself is no surprise. You get used to seeing AF Corsa winning events, whether it's a class or an outright win, where the cars are capable of so doing. But here, after what has been a very intense battle in Pro-Am, perhaps more so even than the Pro Cup through the second half of the race, this Ferrari set to come out on top, and it's being chased by Maurizio Mediani's similar 458 Italia run by SMP Racing that's been delayed because of its recent stop-go penalty.
But two very strong drivers in this car, Tony Villander and Matt Griffin, and ably supported by two very good gentlemen, sort of gentlemen, amateur drivers, Duncan Cameron and Alex Mortimer, and all four of them again have kept their noses clean. They've kept out of trouble. They've not been involved in car bashing or bumping into other competitors on the racetrack. And again, you just mitigate the amount of pit time that you stand still in the pit lane. And it isn't any great secret as to how you run these 24-hour races. The difficulty is getting the whole equation to work. We've seen it extremely successfully work right now for the lead two cars, the Mercedes-Benz and the Porsche, albeit the Porsche did have that issue about overtaking before the safety car line. But apart from that, they've had a flawless race, and very much the case for Tony Villander, Matt Griffin, Duncan Cameron and Mortimer.
This is the car that's third in Pro-Am. It's Lucas Ordóñez at the wheel of the Nissan at the moment, swinging his way through Pau, and with 23 minutes of the race to go, just to make the point that people have made their last pit stop with less than an hour to go, and you can do more than an hour on fuel here. So everybody now, barring a problem, is good to go to the end. Any car that pits now, it's not for anything clever, it's because of a problem. Nobody wants now to pit because they're going to lose time and lose a position, potentially. So everybody is fueled to the end, and 35 is set to be 7th overall and 3rd in Pro-Am for a car driven by 4 people who have come into motor racing by winning the Nissan PlayStation GT Academy competition, and that is a remarkable achievement.
Yes, and it's only Lucas Ordóñez who really, I believe, am I right, has competed in a 24-hour race, or has Jan Mol?
Jan Martin was in this last year,
yeah,
but I don't know whether he actually got to drive the car because it retired early. But my understanding is that the others get to drive in the Dubai 24 as part of the prize. So you go through the assessment, and your first international race is the Dubai 24 hours.
Okay.
But that's a rather different circuit from this.
Totally different. I mean, a lot of work in Dubai. It's not an easy circuit. It's quite tight and winds its way in and out. This is a proper road circuit, and of course the challenge of it is one of the greatest challenges in motorsport.
Absolutely so. Lucas Ordóñez, who has gone from racing GT4 Nissans to prototypes, back in a GT3 car now, and brings the car home as the first ever winner of the competition. We had Darren Cox joining us a little while ago, the man who looks after Nissan's motorsport programme globally, not just in Europe, but taking in the activities in V8 supercars in Australia. And this is the car that, dare I say now, provisionally is leading in the Gentleman Trophy, because the team manager of Sofrev ASP, Jérôme Policon, has been summoned to see the stewards now about that push start from the last pit stop. The car is being driven by Fred Bouvet, with a 2-lap advantage. It should be okay, depending on what sort of penalty the car gets. We don't even know for sure it will get a penalty, but here it comes out of the Courbe Paul Frere. And we had been saying, John and I, that the car would run like clockwork for the race up until that last pit stop, when it had that problem with the starter motor. So it comes now up towards the end of the lap. It is being chased in class by Thierry Pragnio's Ferrari, but 16th overall for Fred Bouvet. Sofrev, as it comes now up towards the bus stop chicane. Coming up over the timing line is the Ferrari in question. Fred Bouvier then looking strong as he comes down towards La Source. All the cars carrying on the windscreen strip, the Baku World Challenge, which will act as the final round of the FIA GT Championship on the streets of Azerbaijan, but with also top finishers from the classes in the Blancpain Endurance Series and British GT joining in the races as well, to hopefully get up to 30 cars for the 2 races there.
I mean, it's going to be a fantastic event in the streets of Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, on the shores of the Caspian Sea, which of course is a landlocked sea, it's not an ocean, and pretty much the sort of the capital of the world of caviar. So happy days from what I can see.
Ferrari running wide, but let's go back down to the pit lane. 20 minutes to go, and Jack is still ferreting out news for us.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to stop, David. Don't worry about that. We've got 2 late pit entries, and well, not even pit, full garage entries as well. The 75 Pro Speed Porsche car has been wheeled back into the pits, and at exactly the same time has the JRM Motorsport car. So they've both been wheeled back into the garage, both having difficult days, and well, 2 days, plural, and it's getting no better just yet. So I'm going to dive in and try and find out what's going on exactly.
Okay, if we can encourage you to go Porsche rather than Nissan, it's purely because Xavier Marson is 8th in that Pro Speed Porsche. That's the significant one out of that. Thank you, Jack. I've just been saying that anybody that pits now has got a problem because they're all fueled to the end. Bang, no sooner do you say it than there is evidence of a problem, and Pro Speed has had enough drama in this race. It doesn't need any more. So important news that from the pit lane. The 8th place car comes in with less than 20 minutes to go.
Well, you know, just your hearts and your what can you do? It just destroys a team to see a car so late in the race come into the pits, be maybe pushed back into the garage, have work carried out. And that's a car that, lots of rubber on the racetrack there.
Flying off that car as he just run over it. That's had a couple of punctures at least this race, hasn't it?
Just that's coming down from down the run into Pujo, so whether that's from other cars around the racetrack, but certainly haven't noticed that bit of rubber on the track before as a Mercedes makes its way down the pit lane to get back onto track.
That, I think, is the Fortec car that we haven't seen for 115 laps, and I would suggest to you that the intention now is to get the car back out with Ollie Webb at the wheel, just to be there at the finish, possibly to line up behind the set to win Mercedes, which would be quite a good publicity shot.
Absolutely. So there we see the rubber it was on the track, but it was kicked up. There's one of those, and there's it's just leaving the pit lane. So which Porsche is this?
That's the 75 Xavier Marson car. That's the one Jack was telling us about.
Yeah, so it's back on track, which is the key, still in 8th place.
But it's on the same lap as the number 18 Mercedes, so there's a battle suddenly now for 8th place. Steve Jans, the Luxembourg driver, chasing after Xavier Marson, the Dutchman, and that could possibly change before the end here. We need to stay on top of that one if we can.
In the meantime, the race leader, Bernd Schneider, just drives on as he's done all afternoon, just now running in the higher 2 minutes 27, just bringing it home, stroking the car every part of this circuit.
And that Pro Speed Porsche was to do with the radiator coolant being low. They've topped it up, sent it back into the race.
Now, is that oil coolant or water coolant? Bearing in mind that the Porsche today is water cooled, but there's oil and water radiators on these cars, and ordinarily adding oil is not a great idea. There is the 2nd place Porsche, which up until the point, I suppose, of getting that penalty for overtaking before the safety car line, was very much in contention for victory. That seemed to seal its fate as being more or less consigned to 2nd place.
It's been a strong run from the car, nonetheless. And for Audi, well, 3rd place is good. A podium finish is still good for Audi, but relative to the last 2 years, they've had a bit of a kicking this season.
It's been tough. Well, the competition's getting tougher. I mean, it's not just simply that Audi are being maybe penalised, balance of performance. It's just simply the opposition, and also the quality of driving has changed a lot. You're getting a lot more young professional drivers who are finding it difficult to get employment in single-seater, which is where they would choose to go. They're getting employment. They maybe will be getting paid as well. to drive in GT events, so that's dragging the whole championship and the performance of it to a higher level. And of course, while Audi have got their established and outstanding drivers, they're no longer maybe the cream of the crop in terms of the quality of engineering and driving. That's now their competition.
I think you're right. Christopher Hasse, who is somebody who's been a mainstay of Audi now for a number of seasons, is the man at the wheel of car 6 at the moment. FIA GT3 European champion going back to 2009. And he comes then now down towards Speaker's Corner. He's on the same lap as the number 2 Audi you were just looking at. How about that for all 4 wheels off? Way, way wide at Speaker Corner there, coming downhill.
For what?
Well, exactly.
15 minutes to go. Okay, you might say he's a lap down on the 3rd place Andre Lotterer Audi. Sometimes that's what some drivers do. That's the way they can keep their concentration. By just suddenly relaxing and saying, well, 15 minutes to go, I don't need to try. You can actually end up getting yourself into trouble by losing that focus. Whereas if you do keep pushing and you keep your motivation and your adrenaline levels high, at least your perception is where it should be.
And this is the car that runs 5th, Tony Villander for AF Corsa. It's a rather modest Ferrari, that. It hardly draws attention to itself at all, does it? There's barely a sticker on the car.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much straight out of the showroom. It's got a windscreen sticker promoting the event in Baku in October. And others, just a bit of Total on the front. Well, they're the series race sponsor. And a Ferrari sticker and a bit of Pirelli in the rear wing. So not a lot of commercial sponsorship there.
No. The only other thing you see on the door is a BRDC badge for Alex Mortimer, who is a member of the British Racing Drivers Club, and he is standing in the pit garage watching on as Tony Villander brings it home. And that car now is a lap up on the opposition after this man, Maurizio Mediani, had to serve that stop-go penalty.
Well, taking a lot of the inside of the Fagna. The first part of it, the right-hand side, gets the rear wheel right over the curb and onto the grass.
14 minutes on the clock then, and we're not getting people pushing on for position anymore. We're just trying to get these cars home to the finish. Although we talk about the total 24 hours of Spa as a race in itself, it is, of course, a point-scoring round of the Blancpain Endurance Series. They've already had points awarded at 6 hours, and at 12 they get double points, the normal full quota, in other words, at the end of the 24 hours. So the drivers here conscious that they need to make sure they get the cars to the finish, and all of the drivers who finish in the top 3 in each of the classes being reminded that they need to make themselves available for the podium ceremonies post-race. Lucas Ordonez goes through in the Nissan. Circuit looking pretty dusty there. That's where we had quite a few spins over the course of the race.
Yeah, but I mean, we were just watching one of the Audis, the Hasse car, and he was running the inside wheel, the right rear wheel over the curb, kissing the grass, and that's what's dragged the dirt on to that part of the racetrack that stopped there.
Is that there recently, or has that been there for a while?
I think that's just recent.
Check that in a moment, see who we might be missing from the lap shaft, as it were. Look at all the rubber that's junked around there. You know exactly where the racing line is, because effectively you're threading your way through all the marbles.
Well, that's one of the difficulties, because the racing line effectively becomes, in many parts of the racetrack, just a line. You haven't got the full access to the full circuit, simply because if you do, you'll pick up so much pickup that not only will it destroy your set of tyres for a period, but lumps of rubber can actually do a lot of damage to bodywork and other parts of the car.
Now, the team manager of this car, number 20, Fred Bouvi's Ferrari, is still being summoned to the stewards. That message is still on the screen. And so if there is some action to be taken, we've not yet had that revealed to us. That could be because he's not got there, and if he doesn't hurry up, then he'll be in even more hot water. 52 for Sport Garage continues behind. That's Thierry Pragno. He makes his way through that source. That is a car that is definitely grubby, isn't it? That has really had a hard race.
Yeah, well, of course, the colour of the car highlights it maybe a little bit more than other colours from yellow when it gets mucky, and that's certainly got a mucky car. You can see all the rubber streaks over the car. Again, just through Eau Rouge, kicking up the dust. Not really something you should think about doing with less than 15 minutes of this race to go. We're now 11 minutes and 54 seconds.
Well, there's 1-1-1. Gaetano Ardania Perez behind the wheel of the Kessel Racing Ferrari, the surviving Kessel Racing Ferrari, to promote Venezuela. And as it comes down towards Bruxelles, this car is 3rd in the Gentleman Trophy. A drive-through penalty for number 20 Fred Bouvi for a pit stop infringement. So it was to do, therefore, with that push start, and a drive-through is going now to have to serve that. It won't cost it anything in real terms, but there is a drive-through penalty set for car number 20. So as the field then works its way to the end of lap 560, number 6 Audi is into the pits. Christopher Haase down the pit lane. So the car that was in 4th place into the pits. This is another one for Jack, if he can, to go and find out about, because number 6 comes in and it's not for a penalty as far as we know. So that is a big surprise that that car should need to come in with only 11 minutes of the race remaining. We'll see if we can gain news from Audi. There is Frank Stippler, who's not terribly concerned about that car. There is number 6 rejoining back into the race, with Christopher Haase at the wheel. Kind of makes you think it was a splash and dash, but that would surprise me if that were the case. It's back on track now. In Pro-Am, 59 Tony Villander ahead of 71 Maurizio Mediani. The question's just been posed to me as to whether, had that 71 Ferrari had fewer pit stops, because it's had 4 more than the AF Corsa car, it could have been into the top 3 overall. Not sure, because of the necessity to have the bronze-graded drivers in the car for a certain amount of time. It's not just the pit stop time that would go against the Pro-Am drivers, it's also the relative pace of the lowest graded driver that's in the car. Bronze-graded drivers, for example, have got to do a minimum of 6 hours in the car. Bronze driving time cumulatively, if you've got 2 bronze drivers, it's still 6 hours. You can split it between them. If it's 1 bronze driver, he must do the 6 hours. So it's not just the pit stops, I think, that would have cost that car a podium finish, and the same is true also for 59. It's also the relative pace of the amateur drivers, if that answers the question for you. So it's still one of the reasons why the Pro Cup will always prevail, because there you've got drivers of a very, very fast pace and all pretty much able to run to the same pace, give or take a few tenths. There's less disparity, whereas in Pro-Am, where you've got genuinely paid pros, they might be quicker on occasions than some in the Pro Cup, but the AMs will certainly be slower than those who will be doing the other stint behind the wheel, the bronze drivers. So you've got that disparity between the pair. But it's a good question to pose, and that's, I reckon, the reason for it. But Pro-Am has really been a very, very good fight in this race. Inevitably, you tend to focus on the Pro Cup and what's been going on there. But Pro-Am, once again, has got the 2 leading cars back on the lead lap. Granted, there's a lot of lap between them, but they're there on the same lap now. And Tony Villander, I think, will still prevail. But up front, this is Bernd Schneider heading with 8.5 minutes still to go to the checkered flag. 8.5 minutes divided by 2.5, which is a flying lap, is going to be the number of laps to go. And as he comes now up towards the Piff Paff, or Les Femmes as it used to be known, he goes under increasingly leaden sky. I still think Murphy's Law will say that it'll rain as soon as the flag goes out, and we'll get through the race, but we won't get through the podium without some rain. But we'll see whether that's going to be borne out as the Mercedes then accelerates off out of campus through the Courbe Paul Frere in a moment, and then up towards Blanchimont. And the 84 Mercedes, the HTP Motorsport car, has just gone impeccably. It has not missed a beat throughout the course of this race, and there's a great combination of the GT stars of the future along with a real old pro in the person of Bernd Schneider. Just looks to have been the perfect combination of drivers, doesn't it? Through the bus stop comes the car, and for a man who's retired, Bernd Schneider's done a lot of winning this year. He should retire more often. He keeps winning races. He comes over the timing line, 7 minutes and 23 seconds there or thereabouts on the clock when he broke the timing beam that time. He's up towards La Source, and he turns his way now out of the tight hairpin and plunges downhill once again. And that's how the sky looks. It's getting greyer, it's getting darker. And the race leader powers uphill once more. So Bernd Schneider, all he has to do now is bring it home. No dramas for him. No dramas for the car, no dramas for the team that we've been aware of. Quick reminder of how we look in Pro Cup. That's your top 6: Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, Porsche. And it means that the Pro Speed 75 is 5th in class, which is good for points. We talk about the overall positions because they are, of course, more relevant for the race, but in terms of championship you get points per class, and so 5th points for the Porsche is going to be very significant indeed, and the championship will be shaping up nicely for the 1,000-kilometre race at the Nürburgring, 22nd of September, and as I've been saying, it's a good weekend of racing that. If you fancy coming to have a look at Blancpain in the flesh, then I'd certainly recommend the last round of the championship. Great circuit and some good support races to keep you entertained as well. Here, the leading car. Is this going to be one that's purely here for 24 hours, or could, if it scores a win here, the team be tempted back to race at the Nürburgring as well? Keep your fingers crossed that they will. Same true of the second place Manthey Racing team. So for Dieter Eberling's team, Bernd Schneider leads the way, and we're into the last 6 minutes of the race now. Lower down the order, 4th and 5th are not that far apart, with the Christopher Haase Audi being chased by Tony Villander, but although he was lapping a little bit quicker by 0.3 of a second, I think the gap is too much for him to make up, and Tony, yeah, he's about 2/3 of a lap back. He'll also realise that the class position is more important than overall, so he'll no doubt aim to bring the car home now in a safe 5th place. More Mercedes heading towards us, the Black Falcon cars, the second of which is Steve Jans, who is 4th in Pro-Am. There's the Pro-Am leader, Tony Villander, at the wheel out of La Source, now heading downhill once again. Matt Griffin looking a bit nervous there as he watches the clock tick away. Behind him is Alex Mortimer, Duncan Cameron with the long grey hair sitting at the front of the garage. They were winners together, Duncan and Matt, in the IGTO races, or the second IGTO race, International GT Open at Silverstone a fortnight ago. And now potentially class winners in the total 24 hours of Spa as well. Number 19 Mercedes heading uphill, that's had a fairly busy race. Francesco Castellacci at the wheel of it, that is set to be, well, 24th in terms of distance. It'll be 22nd because ahead of 2 cars that have retired from the race. And Steve Jans, who's the other Mercedes driver in the shot there, just up the road ahead of the Ferrari. He is 8th overall and 4th in Pro-Am. Tony Villander turning his way out of Bruxelles once more, downhill, going towards Speaker's Corner, and as he does so, then the 59 Ferrari that lost time early on in the race, but certainly fought back very impressively through the night. The team worked very, very well, got the pad and discs changed early hours of the morning, and is now looking good for a class win. There's Duncan Cameron, thumbs up. Matt Griffin still looking desperately nervous. Yeah, a smile is forced, but there's lots of puffing out of his cheeks there. He knows, and he said it to Jack early on in the race, it's not over till it's over, and we're 3.5 minutes away from it being over. And that's Fred Bouvi, who is still leading despite the drive-through penalty, the Gentleman Trophy. And it's a good job that the penalty wasn't more draconian, I think, for them, but Sofrev ASP is set to give Ferrari 2 class wins out of a possible 3 here, and for Patrice Goellard and the Jean-Luc Bobelic, Jean-Luc Blanchemin, this will be a 3rd win of this year, because they won the class at Monza, they won again at Paul Ricard, and Ferrari very much has been the car to beat within the Gentleman Trophy. I think now Mercedes have decided it's time to celebrate, because now the AMG flags are being readied, and for the first time since 1964, a Mercedes-Benz product is going to come across the line. The race rather different, indeed the circuit different. It's no longer the road course, it's the permanent circuit at Spa, and GT3 had never been dreamt of back in 1964. Bernd Schneider, if he times this right, will be on his last lap coming up to the line now. Let's see when he breaks the timing beam. He does so with 2:24 on the clock, so he's on his last lap, because there is now less than a lap time left in the race. He can afford to back off his pace, and that timing line he has just gone across is where the race will end, but there will be a ceremonial waving of the checkered flag down past the endurance pits, the old start and finish line. If you look at many of the photographs of the history of not just this race but Spa in general, it will always be with that as the backdrop, that part of the circuit. That's the old start and finish area, and the pit lane now only really used for endurance races here. So you've got the F1 pits and the endurance pits, but the Spa 24 hours that dates back to 1924, big on heritage, and they're going to continue to use the endurance pits and that line as the start line, and the ceremonial finish, although the race will have ended a corner before. 14 previous winners started this year's Spa 24 Hours, the 65th running of the event. One of them, Bernd Schneider, is going to come through victorious. His last victory back in 1989, as we've been saying during the race. Then it was in a Group A Ford Sierra Cosworth. Now, with the event having moved away from the European Touring Car Championship and saloon car racing in general to GT racing, which has been the absolute perfect way of rejuvenating what was a flagging event, Mercedes is going to come through victorious once again. This fourth round of the Blancpain Endurance Series, it's the first Blancpain victory for Bernd Schneider, and also it will be the first Blancpain win for the two Maximilians, Buch and Goetz. Up and down the F1 pits now, the mechanics from different teams getting themselves ready to cheer home their cars, standing on the pit wall, standing on the prep perch, and getting ready to cheer home the cars, which will have completed, in the case of the winner, 564 laps. Last year it was 509 in the rain, and it's been bone dry, much to the astonishment of many, right the way through this year. Here comes Bernd Schneider then, making his way up towards Blanchimont for the last time. It's been a gentle lap, this, and understandably so. The car has just been faultless, no question about it. It has not missed a beat, and as it now makes its way up to the bus stop for the last time, the total 24 Hours of Spa of 2013 is won by HTP Motorsports, by Mercedes, by Maximilian Goetz, Maximilian Buch, and Bernd Schneider, who accelerates up towards the line. Mercedes wins the Spa 24 Hours of 2013. Victory to Bernd Schneider, Maximilian Buch and Maximilian Goetz. The door is opened. A delighted Bernd Schneider punches the air, waves to the mechanics to say thanks for all your efforts and to congratulate them as well as he heads down towards La Source. There's another checkered flag still to be waved, the ceremonial finish of the event. You can't overtake until you get there. You have to stay in order, and the Maximilians straight away face the media in the pit lane. They'll go to the podium. We'll hear from them, I'm sure, with John Watson very shortly. John's made his way down there to be part of the victory celebrations, and very happy scenes. We've been so used for the last couple of years to seeing the Audi part of the pit lane, the real centre of attention. Not this year. Mercedes comes out on top. That is going to be a very important win for marketing purposes back home. And for Bernd Schneider, having won in Dubai in 24 Hours earlier in the year, he's won the Nürburgring 24, the Bathurst 12 Hours. He now adds the Spa 24-hour victory to that list as well. What a season for a man who's theoretically retired from racing. Here's the second place car. Well, sadly, in the last 3 or 4 hours of the race, the Manthey Porsche had to accept defeat against the Mercedes, but Marc Lieb, Patrick Pilet and Richard Lietz have given it their all. The car just not quite as quick as the Mercedes. Home it will come, second overall, second in the Pro Cup, and again, a superb effort from everybody connected to that team. The car just one lap down in the end on the winning Mercedes, and through in third place we have the Audi number 2 just coming through in the background. For honours in Pro-Am, here now comes the AF Corsa Ferrari. Tony Villander will bring it home, and those nervous faces we saw in the garage a few minutes ago hopefully now will break into big smiles. Matt Griffin was looking the most pensive, and let's see what sort of reaction the AF Corsa Ferrari gets. A single finger in the air. P1 in Pro-Am for Tony Villander for AF Corsa, and big cheers as he comes across the timing line. The speed lover Porsche in the background, that's not been the quickest car in the race, makes it home. Whether that's going to be classified because of its lack of laps relative to the overall winner, I'll tell you when I've worked out what 70% of 564 is, which is the number of laps completed by Bernd Schneider, who's on his slowing down lap now. The flags all around the circuit wave, the marshals congratulating all of the drivers, and the cars heading now to, in the case of the top 3 in each class, Parc Fermé, the drivers to the podium. And Bernd Schneider, if he can cast his mind back to what it was like in 1989 when he won, must think it's very different now. Spa has evolved, the race has evolved, and so has the level of competition. So Bernd Schneider, Maximilian Buch and Max Goetz, the winners outright. Second for Manthey Racing, Marc Lieb, Patrick Pilet and Richard Lietz. And in third place, It is the Audi André Lotterer, having a much better result this year than last. Frank Stippler, last year's winner, coming home on the podium once again, and the third driver of that car, Christopher Mies. And he too, I'm sure, will be a happy man with the result. Let's confirm how they came across the line. The provisional classification then is a win for HTP Motorsport. Bernd Schneider, Maximilian Buch and Maximilian Goetz win the total 24 Hours of Spa for 2013, ahead of Mark Lieb, Richard Lietz and Patrick Pilet. Third, André Lotterer, Christopher Mies and Frank Stippler. Fourth goes the way of Harold Primat, Oliver Jarvis and Christopher Hasse. In fifth place, it is the Ferrari of Tony Villander, Matt Griffin, Duncan Cameron and Alex Mortimer, ahead of Mika Salo, Kira Ladijin, Victor Shaitar and Maurizio Mediani. Seventh, Lucas Ordonez, Jan Mardenborough, Peter Pitzera and Wolfgang Reip. Eighth, Klaus Hummel, Steve Jans, Adam Christodoulou and Thomas Jaeger. Good result for them. Ninth behind them, Pro Speed Porsche. 10th was SMP Racing. And as you look lower down the order, a number of these cars among the walking wounded, but definitely a big cheer for 16th overall for the winners of the Gentleman Trophy. Fred Bouvy, Patrice Guélard, Jean-Luc Blanchemin and Jean-Luc Bobelic bring home the winning car ahead of Sport Garage 52, Kessel Racing 111. But in each case, Ferrari 458 Italias coming home successfully in the Gentleman Trophy. And these are the cars that, sad to say, did not get to the end. Many of them unclassified because of the lack of laps completed, others officially retirements. But it underlines just what a hard race it was. The pace relentless right the way through. We've seen a lot of people with mechanical dramas, a lot of people going out early on in accidents. And quite a few damaged cars are going to leave Belgium and need a lot of TLC before they race again. Wheels coming off Pressy Spark Mercedes. Electrical problems putting out Mark VDS. Engine dramas for the McLaren teams. Damage for number 0 Audi. Number 12 was out with engine problems. Electrics put paid to number 4 BMW. Everything apparently happened to number 9 McLaren. The team really having had a nightmare with that until the car was retired. And accident damage put paid to number 13 previous winners Marcel Fassler and Matthias Ekstrom. Damage and a vibration was the reason for 43's retirement. Number 7 was accident damage. 77 was a spin into the gravel. Number 100 was ignition and then overheating. Number 1 was problems with accident damage and the crankshaft on the car. Engine failure for 125. It's a long, long list of retirements. Accident damage for number 66 Porsche. We saw that when he got hit by Carl Wendlinger. A wheel came off 123 and did damage. Jos Menton crashed 24. The engine failed on 11. Alex Buncombe crashed 32 and the fuel pressure disappeared on lap 7 for the number 188 BMW. The marshals, having waved their flags for 24 hours, will now be able to leave their post, and the recovery crews will go out and try and retrieve a number of cars littered around the circuit. Many, of course, did stagger to the pits and expire there. Others have stopped around the circuit, and the winning drivers, in fact everybody, being applauded quite rightly for their sterling efforts in the course of that race. They now make their way down the pit lane, and the celebrations will be underway very shortly. Of course, there are 3 podium ceremonies to do, 1 per class, and we'll be getting those underway very shortly indeed, as the cars that don't need to go to scrutineering will be returned to the teams. I think just about every car, though, is going to be double-checked by the officials, so the Parc Fermé area is going to get pretty busy soon. There, though, is the winning Mercedes. The top 3 in each category go to the Parc Fermé area under the podium, ready for the presentations. And a scrum of photographers there. There is the winning car, and Bernd Schneider has his 3rd 24-hour race win of the season. Though again, you can see how in Pro Cup the cars came across the line, but for the purposes of the podium, the top 3 were not just in the class, they were also overall there. The drivers we're going to have up on the podium very shortly. Bernd Schneider bumps his head as he gets out from under the gull-wing door, stands on top of the Mercedes, and Bernd Schneider celebrates a 2nd win in the Spa 24 Hours. A delighted man 5 times a DTM champion, Formula 1 driver as well. That's a part of his career that people tend to forget. It was not that successful driving for Zaxby, driving for the Arrows team. He never really had the machinery to do his talent justice. Had he done so, he might have made Formula 1 even more popular in Germany before Michael Schumacher came along and did so. But Ben Schneider went off to race in the FIA GT Championship and the DTM and win multiple titles. And John Watson is down there to have a word with Ben Schneider after winning the Spa 24 Hours, John.
Ben Schneider, you and the 2 Maxes have won Spa 24. How good is that?
Unbelievable. It was an amazing race. Such a hard battle, and we all were really exhausted after the long night. And no, it was amazing. The team made a fantastic job. The car was outstanding. The car was perfect. We could push and driving as hard as I could, and the car survived and we survived, and we are really happy. Thank you.
Tell me, how can a retired racing driver win 3 24-hour races and a 12-hour race in 1 year?
I don't know. I think it was the right time to stop with sprint races and start with long distance races. No, I'm really happy. I mean, I did most of the development in our SLS car, and I'm so happy that I still can do some races with our teams. And I'm so happy for HDP team because they was pushing hard. Last year we had a little problem at Nürburgring with the team and in second place. And now, this time, these guys made everything right, and we will have a big party tonight.
Absolutely. Now tell me, you went off message very early in the race. You made an early pit stop. Did that contribute much, do you think, to your overall position and victory?
I mean, in the beginning we were a bit unlucky with the safety car. But now, in the end, we were at the right moment and Porsche maybe in the wrong time, and this give us the lead. Otherwise, it would be a battle until the last minute.
Anyway, fantastic drive. Congratulations, Bernd. Everybody's delighted for you and for the team. And the 2 youngsters, the 2 Maxes.
Absolutely. They made a great job, especially Maxi Burg. He did... he made all the...
Max, congratulations, fantastic effort. All 3 of you, flawless race.
It was brilliant. It was my first time here in Spa, and we won directly, so it's crazy also for Max. The first time here and to win in the first year, so it's unbelievable.
Well, there's 2 Maxis in this team, 2 youngsters. Maximilian Buch, congratulations. What does winning 24 hours, the total Spa 24-hour race, mean to you?
A lot. I cannot really say something about it now because it's so amazing. We didn't really expect that. We just came here to show a good performance from our side, and now we are first. Yeah, unbelievable.
Well, you 2 gentlemen and your senior driver, go and enjoy yourself and celebrate tonight.
Well, they'll go to the podium in a moment, and you can see the emotion amongst the drivers. Utterly delighted. This was how Ben Schneider came across the line with a lap in hand to win the total 24 hours of Spa. And straight away he was able to slow and celebrate with the team, and you can see the reaction from the Maximilians as he came across the line. Ben Schneider's 2nd victory in this event, and it's yet another victory to add to an illustrious CV that he has. What about the 2nd place team, the Manthey Racing guys? John's caught up with them.
Mark Lee, congratulations, but how hard was this race?
It was very hard. It was very hot at the beginning, and you know, we just did single stints. We couldn't do double stint. The temperature was too hot also in the night, and it was always a close fight. At the beginning it was against the BMWs, then in the nighttime it was against the SLS, so it was always close until the last 4 or 5 hours when we got some engine problems and some safety cars which weren't helping us at all. But in the end, we can be very happy with P2 because I think with all the problems we had at the end, we can be very, very happy and very satisfied.
Richard Lieb, all 3 of you drivers drove your hearts out to try and get victory, but do you think that safety car, well, you made it, or the error by passing before the safety car line contributed to the result?
Honestly, I was sleeping at that time, but I just heard about it, and I think it was very close. I mean, nobody is doing this on purpose, of course, and he knows the rule. So I'm not sure, you know, maybe we have to see a different angle. But anyway, we got the penalty, and it's not the reason why we lost the race. I mean, we went flat out from the beginning, and unfortunately at the end we had sometimes just 5 cylinders or 4 cylinders even. So we are happy to finish the race, and P2 is the maximum we could do. And after the qualifying, if you look the speed from the others, I think nobody expected a P2 for us. So it was a nice race, it was a hard fight, and I'm happy it's over now, and now celebration.
Well, congratulations. Patrick Pilet, apparently you were the guilty sub, but anyway, fantastic drive from all three of you, and you must be pleased to be on the podium. Second place, almost the best.
Yeah, we can be proud, like my teammates say. We make an excellent job, especially our mechanics. I would like to thank because they make an excellent job all the time, especially to change the tires. Honestly, we are a bit disappointed, but we cannot do a better result. We have some issue, like Richard said, but we'll be back next year maybe.
Well, I look forward to see Porsche winning next year. Okay, thank you very much.
So as the Manthey racing drivers make their way to the podium, of course the other team in the Pro Cup for third place was the Belgian Audi Club team WRT, and the three drivers will be down there in a moment, I'm sure. There is the Porsche. You can see all the rubber marks up the side. We hadn't been able to glean news of the engine problem, but now that does explain why the pace was disappearing a little bit for the Manthey racing car. What about the Pro-Am winners? Let's hear from Tony Villander.
Tony Villander, congratulations, 5th overall, but winners of Pro-Am. And by the way, I called you Mats Villander. No relation, I imagine.
No, he's Swedish and he's a tennis player, so... I mean, the race was great. This is what 24-hour racing is about, up and down, all the emotion in the beginning of the race. We were a couple of laps down. We fight back. We had the rain during the night, and we stayed on slicks, and we fight the laps back, and it was a great effort from of course, Matt Griffin, Duncan Cameron, and Alex. So I'm really happy for the team, all my teammates, and really good victory.
Well, I'm very pleased also. Matt Griffin, of course, is Irish. Keep it in the family. Finland, Ireland, Great Britain. And what are you looking forward to now next?
I mean, I have a busy schedule in the future. Hey, Mika. Busy schedule next week. Some more testing for the WEC championship. But today, I think we enjoyed this one, and this is really important and really what we were looking for.
Well, you Finns and the Irish, I know they can celebrate. You'll have fun tonight. Yeah, congratulations.
You guys here, so it's good.
And you saw Mika Salo come down, fellow Finn, to offer his congratulations. Of course, are very much one of the top Ferrari teams, and it's just been illustrated once again here for the squad. It could have had perhaps a 1-2 in class, but remember that the car of Nick Homerson, Louis Macchiels, Andrea Bertolini and Marco Ciocci crashed out early on today. That was quite a big accident for Louis Macchiels, which of course took another potential result away from the AF Corsa team. So the drivers will now make their way to the podium. First of all, though, is the Coupe de Roi presentation, and Amato Ferrari's team takes the trophy and a Blancpain clock as well. And the Coupe de Roi is for the best team effort, and so the presentation done for the King's Cup and then the individual class podiums. It's the same overall, of course, as it is for the Pro Cup, and those drivers are being rounded up at the back of the podium, and then they'll be brought forward. The podium ceremonies, of course, always take a little bit longer than you anticipate, because the drivers want to go and congratulate their co-drivers, and also, of course, here for those teams that are in the top pits, they've got to be brought all the way through the paddocks. This is how it looks behind the podium. Mika Salo in the blue and white overalls. The Audi drivers are there. Slightly gloved faces from Manthey Racing, so near and yet so far. But as soon as the signal is given, then out comes Andre Lotterer, Christopher Mies and Frank Stippler for third place for Belgian Audi Club Team WRT. For second place for Manthey Racing, out comes Mart Lieb, Richard Lietz and Patrick Pilet. And for the top step of the podium, out will come Ben Schneider, Maximilian Buch and Maximilian Goetz.
Qui arrive sur le podium, le chef d'équipe également qui va nous rejoindre pour HTP Motorsports. Bernd Schneider, ladies and gentlemen.
There is Ben Schneider, making his way on to the podium. Now, the national anthem of the winning team. Maximilian Götz, Maximilian Buch and Ben Schneider win the total 24 hours of Spa for Mercedes, for HTP Motorsports, and three delighted drivers are on the top step of the podium as the trophies are brought to the third place drivers and the presentation made by Hugo da Silva, the event manager for Blancpain. Andre Lotter, Christopher Mies and Frank Stippler hold the trophies aloft, and the Blancpain clock goes to them as well. For second place, the trophies being presented by Patrice Bress, the CEO of Total in Belgium, and Patrick Pillet, Richard Lietz and Mark Lieb have their trophies, and the Porsche drivers celebrate second place. And then for the winning drivers, the three German drivers aboard the Mercedes of HTP Motorsport, Maximilians, Götz and Buch and Ben Schneider are ready to receive their awards. First of all, though, there is another trophy to be found, and it's for Mark Lieb, and there is the Blancpain clock as well. But out steps to present to the race winners Francois Cornelis, the president of the Royal Automobile Club of Belgium, and he gives two trophies, one to Ben Schneider, one to Maximilian Götz, and the other will go to Max Buch in a minute as the trophy is brought forward. And we also have the impressive Blancpain clock as well that is presented to Maximilian Buch, Maximilian Götz and Ben Schneider as the winners of the 2013 total 24 hours of Spa. And we've had class wins in the past for Mercedes, but that's the first outright win for the Mercedes in the 3-year history of the Blancpain Endurance Series. And now we have the champagne for the winning drivers atop the podium after another grueling total 24 hours of Spa. In terms of overall wins this year, it's been one to Ferrari, one to Aston Martin, one to BMW, and now one to Mercedes. As I say, the first outright victory as well to the car. And as the top three in the Pro Cup leave the podium, we will in a moment, the Audi and Mercedes flags are flying, and three different brands represented across the top three places in the race. Disappointment in a sense for Porsche, not being able to capitalise on this 50th year of the 911 with a victory in the championship with one more round to go. It's going to be a good finale for sure, with now 2 points between Ramos, Rigon and Zampieri over Buch, Mies and Stippler. But we need to see how many of the guest drivers, as it were, the race-by-race entrants, come to the Nürburgring having done Spa. I think it'd be great to have HTP Motorsport and Manthey Racing back in for the last round of the championship. Well, there are the drivers with their trophies ready to make their way off the podium. All the photographs are done, all the presentations are done, And 2 more podium ceremonies still to come after the 4th round of the Blancpain Endurance Series, the 65th, total 24 hours of Spa. The Maximilians savouring the moment. And Bernd Schneider, I wonder if he ever thought after 1989 that he'd win it again. Certainly not after such a long break, surely. All those wins in the DTM, all those titles in the DTM, and now for a retired racing driver, his 3rd 24-hour race win of the season. And all at fabulous venues as well. The champagne is dropped and caught by the team. So Bernd Schneider congratulated and waves one last time from the top of the podium. And a superb event, a superb result for Bernd Schneider. So with the sea of fans and team personnel, mechanics, engineers, all beneath the podium, the Pro-Am Cup will come next to the podium, won by Ferrari, a 1-2 indeed for the Ferraris. AF Corse are ahead of SMP Racing. Duncan Cameron, Matt Griffin, Alex Mortimer, Tony Villander taking victory ahead of Mika Salo, Kirill Ladijin, Victor Shaita and Maurizio Mediani. And then the gamers, Lucas Ordonez, Jan Mardenborough, Peter Patzera and Wolfgang Reip taking 3rd. Mercedes 4th, Ferrari 5th, Porsche 6th in class, with the winning car eventually with a 1-lap margin. Tony Villander, who we heard from a little while ago, having brought it home. But a good Pro-Am class battle right the way through. Ferrari coming out on top, but the Nissan, an impressive run for sure from Lucas Ordonez, Jan Mardenborough, Peter Pizzera and Wolfgang Reip, 2 Spa rookies. Jan Mardenborough has done very well, not just to come 2nd in class, but adapt from racing a Formula 3 car in 3 races, and indeed rolling it early on in the weekend. He got involved in a big accident at Eau Rouge with his teammate Nicolas Latifi. He crashed into the tyres. Jan rolled. Thankfully, he was okay. Lucas Ordonez, Peter Pizzera, Wolfgang Reip and Jan Mardenborough, in that order, make their way out onto the podium. It was a win for Lucas Ordonez at Silverstone and for Peter Pizzera in the Pro-Am class. The driving crews shuffled around a little bit for Spa, but it's a podium finish for Nissan Bob Neville's team, losing Alex Buncombe's car early on, but taking 2nd place with the surviving car. And then for 2nd place, out onto the podium, we have Kirill Ladijin, Maurizio Mediani, Victor Shaita and Mika Salo for SMP Racing. Had it not been for that drive-through, could they have got close enough to challenge AF Corse come the end? Not sure, with Tony Villander in the car for the last stint. Not convinced they'd ever have caught them. Tony Villander makes his way out, so does Duncan Cameron, hat aloft, Matt Griffin and Alex Mortimer, former British GT champion, is there with his spec in the background. And the AF Corse team comes out on top. There is barely a championship in which Amato Ferrari's team does not win these days. And here is another day, another race, another victory for one of its many Ferraris. Handshakes all round. The drivers up onto the top step of the podium. And then the trophies will be presented first of all to the 3rd placed Nissan drivers. And as we were discussing with Darren Cox during the course of the race, Nissan's motorsport boss, an excellent effort for 3 gaming drivers, but the Italian national anthem first for AF Corse. For AF Corse, Italian national anthem. Pro-Am honours go the way of Matt Griffin, Duncan Cameron, Alex Mortimer and Tony Villander. 4 delighted drivers on the top step of the podium. And Hugo da Silva, the event manager of Blancpain, stepped forward with trophies and clocks. The Blancpain clock, 1 per team, is presented. And Lucas Ordonez, Jan Mardenborough, who nearly got a face full of trophy there from Wolfgang Reip and Peter Pizzera, celebrate 3rd in Pro-Am in the total 24 hours of Spa. For 2nd place, the trophies there being presented by Patrice Bress, the CEO of Total Belgium, and the SMP Racing Ferrari drivers. Another good effort And Mika Salo's experience and speed, I think, contributed greatly to that. But the Russian drivers, Kirill Ladygin, who's raced in touring cars, and Victor Shaita, joined by the Italian Maurizio Mediani. And although they've been up and down the order a bit, they're on the podium when it counts. But for the winners, the trophies will be presented in a moment by François Cornelis, the president of the RACB, the Royal Automobile Club of Belgium, which organises the on-track part of the race and, of course, is key to the event itself. It's looked after the heritage of the Spa 24 Hours. And it will be his task to present the winners' trophies in a moment. And the Ferrari drivers absolutely delighted, because there were stages when the 59 Ferrari did not look, certainly yesterday, as though it was going to come good. It was a long way down. It seemed to lose time early on with a few pit stops early doors in the race. But as François Cornelis presents the trophies to Alex Mortimer and Matt Griffin, first of all, they come good in the end. Duncan Cameron awaits his trophy. There you are, Duncan. And you at the back, Tony Villander, squeezes through, gets his trophy as well. Trophies aloft for the race winners. That's the podium for the Pro-Am class in the total 24 Hours of Spa. And with 564 laps completed by the winners, it has for sure been a very tough race, very high rate of attrition this year across all three classes, not just the Pro Cup. AF Corsa receives its trophy as well, and the winning drivers get the Blancpain clock. Duncan Cameron, as the gentleman racer, claims that. Lucas Ordóñez then heads the Drivers' Championship, going to the Nürburgring from Peter Pizzera and then Alex Buncombe. Andrea Bertolini, Nick Hommerson and Louis Machiels having not scored in the final hours of the race because of the car crashing out after 12 hours, end up on 50 points with one more round of the championship still to go. So, from the total 24 Hours of Spa, we've had another superb race, won by Mercedes. The Blancpain Endurance Series has one more round to go at the Nürburgring. But now, from Belgium, for Jack Nicholls, John Watson and David Addison, goodbye. Here at Spa for the total 24 Hours of Spa, we've got one more podium ceremony still to come. There you can see Pro-Am drivers busy celebrating still, and the AF Corsa guys have got the champagne ready. But Duncan Cameron doesn't want to join in this because he doesn't want to be parted from his new Blancpain clock, which normally is reserved just for champions, but winners in the 24 Hours get one as well this year. And it's only right, as the AM, and therefore the man who has put quite a lot of money into the drive and the team for the weekend, that Duncan gets the clock. So the drivers make their way from the podium. There's Matt Griffin. Well done, Matt. A very happy guy, understandably so. And the presentation's done for Pro-Am. The podium now dressed, ready for the Gentleman Trophy. And for the third time this year, it's been all about Ferrari. Porsche won at Silverstone, but at Monza, at Paul Ricard, and now at Spa, three different sorts of circuit for sure. Ferrari comes out on top. Now the Nissan drivers from third in class still celebrating. And as they do so, that underlines another good result for Bob Neville's RJN team in Pro-Am. Gentleman Trophy won by Jean-Luc Blanchemin, Jean-Luc Bobelic, Patrice Goélard and Fred Bouvier, ahead of the Sport Garage Ferrari and the Kessel Racing car bagging third. Ferrari and Porsche then lower down the order. But after seventh, nobody else finished. The Joneses Mercedes lost a wheel early on, and the real question mark is whether or not 94 has done enough laps to be actually classified as a finisher after its various dramas during the race. So a 1, 2, 3, 4 for Ferrari, and the winning drivers to make their way onto the podium. And as far as the championship is concerned, another great result for Patrice Goélard and Jean-Luc Bobelic and Blanchemin. For third place, though, the largely Venezuelan crewed team makes its way forward. The Venezuelans are Pablo Palladino, Paolo Andreassi and Gaetano Ardagna Perez, and the Italian Giuseppe Ciro brought into the team not just for good measure, but to do great things and make that car go very quickly indeed. Stéphane Lemeray steps forward, having finished in second place, along with Leonardo Guarini, Romain Brandella and Stéphane Lemeray. And they make their way to the second step of the podium. But what about for the very top? That is going to be claimed, despite a drive-through penalty, for the previous winner. There in the Red Bull overalls is Fred Bouvier. Behind him, Jean-Luc Bobelic, Jean-Luc Blanchemin and Patrice Goélard make their way onto the podium. Fred Bouvier, a winner twice outright, now a class winner. But he's had to work just as hard for it, because certainly the race this year much more competitive than in the days than a Group N, effectively production saloon car race, which is how the Spa 24 Hours had become with the death of the European Touring Car Championship. It's a very crowded podium with drivers bringing their families, younger members of the family, up onto the podium, and Jérôme Policon from the Sofrev Autosport Promotion team there as well as the representative of the winning team, Fred Bouvier, a very jolly chap. And there's room, I think, somewhere there for Jean-Luc Bobelic to squeeze in as well. Already the champagne is sprayed. It's Fred Bouvier, I think, who is the one that's been a bit previous. There he is, the background, and he's the one in the Red Bull overalls. They back his Belgian racing car championship, the Salt, in which he drives a Porsche. He was racing a Porsche early on in the weekend. He's been able to switch from that to a Ferrari, and he comes out, despite the starter motor problem, on top. But that for the championship is just brilliant news for Jean-Luc Bobelic, Jean-Luc Blanchemin and Patrice Goyla. A third win in 4 races. The trophy is then for the third place drivers, presented by Hugo da Silva, the event manager for Blancpain. Trophies, and the clock is there as well. And the Venezuelan team absolutely delighted, and that's some consolation for Kessel Racing, having lost its Pro Cup car within the last, hour and a half of the race or so. Patrice Bress, the CEO of Total Belgium, steps forward now to hand over the trophies to the second place drivers, Leonardo Guarini, Thierry Pregno, Romain Brandella and Stéphane Lemeray, who always finds a drive at this event. He's a very rapid amateur racer, Stéphane Lemeray, but also a very industrious journalist, and so it's through the ability to get coverage for different championships and cars that he always finds a drive in something, and has got a very broad CV because he races things by way of a track test on a regular basis. Fred Bouvier gets his trophy, so too does Jean-Luc Blanchemin. And there are more trophies to come for Jean-Luc Bobelic and for Patrice Goyla. A handout stretched comes from Jean-Luc Bobelic. Patrice Goyla is in the background. Jérôme Policon is there on the podium as well as the winning team representative. What about me, he says. He's got a bottle of champagne. He gets the clock. I'm having that, he says. And Jérôme Policon, a very happy team boss, as Sofrev ASP wins the Gentleman Trophy in the Total 24 Hours of Spa. The champagne is sprayed. The Gentleman Trophy podium here is complete. The champagne sprayed on the podium. And as the drivers then douse each other in champagne, let's have a look back at some of the best bits of the Total 24 Hours of Spa, which has given us great drama, as now the drivers enjoy great celebrations on the podium. So we'll have the drivers off the podium in a moment. There's Fred Bouvier, and as he heads from the podium, the celebrations continue. Interviews taking place. All the drivers head to the press conference after this, which is going to be a busy old place, with the top 3 in each of the classes there. So, as that's the scene in the pit lane, drivers now make their way to the press conference. Let's have a look at some of the best bits now of the Spa 24 Hours, with Mercedes coming out on top and class wins for Ferrari in Pro-Am and Gentleman Trophy. a sunny Saturday and the start of the total 24 hours of Spa. A 65-strong grid ready to get the race underway. Red Foot, who would perform the Saturday night concert, was on the grid to have a look at what a GT3 car was all about. Stefan Mucker, the pole position driver, clambered aboard the Beach D and Aston Martin. And after the pace lap, the race got underway. And it nearly didn't last long for some, as Alessandro Pietruidi knocked his brain out of gear and had this big lose at the top of the hill and very nearly wiped out a goodly number of cars. Alvaro Parent for Hexis was busy battling with Maximilian Goetz in the 84 Mercedes, those two trading places over the line. But Alex Buncombe was an early casualty. That brought out the safety car, everybody bunched up behind. And the pack was released. We didn't go green for long. Jos Menton had this big accident at the top of Radion, the Lamborghini bouncing off the curb and thumping into the tyres. He was okay, the car was out of the race, and Hexis was soon in trouble as well with an overheating McLaren, the car limping home as it got cooler, so the pace quickened. No such dramas though for Marc VDS, its cars running strongly within the top 10 places. For this event, the team was running 3. The regular 2 cars both took turns in the lead early on. Number 14, Marc VDS BMW, just a bit further down the order. Pit stops were cycled through, and running out of sequence after an early pit stop behind the safety car was the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. That therefore had topped up on fuel as other cars pitted, so it rose up the order and straight away began to look a little bit more of a threat for honours. Number 14, BMW, did not last much longer though. An engine failure put that out. It almost wiped out a Ferrari as Jens Klingmann limped off the circuit. Marco Schelp's Porsche was wiped out. He got hit by Carl Wendlinger, and that thumped the Porsche off into the barriers. An expensive repair bill for one team, only a drive-through penalty, the aggressor. Patrick Pilet made his move around the outside to grab the lead of the race, getting past back markers and also Jelmer Berman in one easy move. Berman pitted, he would double stint behind the wheel of the car, and Patrick Pilet was able to relay Mark Lieb a couple of laps later. BMW rejoined, Porsche pitted. Lieb took over, and then the question was whether he'd be able to rejoin the circuit ahead of Jelmer Berman. The answer was no, but it didn't take him long to get back onto the tail of the BMW and mount his attack for the position once again, because as the cars worked their way downhill, a lap or so later towards Poix, Mark Lieb used the traffic to his advantage, managed to box in Jelmer Berman and dive through up the inside. Daylight turned to dusk then as the sun set and the cars worked their way into the night. Even harder for the teams to go about their business, more stress, and with the lack of sleep, even more demanding on them physically. Going into the darkness hours, points were awarded at the 6-hour mark, and the Marc VDS BMW team looking very strong indeed. Sadly though, the cars would wilt during the night. Off track, plenty of distractions to keep the non-race fan entertained. If they did look to the track, they'd see a firework display from Johnny Adam as he brought the Aston Martin into the pit lane. And the picture postcard view of Spa as the cars slogged on into the night. The pit building lights came on, the fireworks started, the concert got into full swing, and others enjoyed themselves off track. The cars raced on, but through the darkness hours, inevitably, things would start to tell. As dawn broke over Spa, there were fewer sets of headlights blasting out of the chicane, there were fewer cars circulating, there were fewer people awake. The barbecues were lit, ready for breakfast, but as dawn broke, it did so over stranded cars, one significantly. The Linders, Berman, Martin BMW out with electrical problems. An 84 Mercedes became the race leader ahead of the 150 Porsche. The battle between them took us up towards noon, but after that the Porsche started having engine problems, lost a bit of ground, lost a bit of pace. In contrast, number 44 Ferrari was making good progress. It was up at one stage into the top 3. More tyre changes for the weary crews to perform down in the pit lane. Ferrari fans well catered for in the total 24 hours of Spa. Race fans well catered for as well, as the lead traded once more. Mercedes getting ahead of Porsche on the run downhill. McLaren had a pretty ropey night. Bruno Senna was the better placed McLaren driver until he was tagged into a spin by ProSpeed's Porsche down at the bus stop. That did damage to the diffuser of the car. It was replaced, it fell off, it was replaced again, and it fell off again. Audis have been dropping out of the race during the night. No such dramas though for the surviving RJN Nissan. Its only problem was the digital display dropping down off the windscreen. The photographers had lots of action to snap away at, and it continued as Ferrari and BMW got side by side heading down towards La Source, and Cesar Ramos in the Ferrari got himself up and past the BMW in the hands of Stefano Colombo. Gulf Racing's mechanics were still trying to catch up on sleep, not helped by camera crews waking them up now and again. Out on track though, Porsche led from Mercedes. The pattern was emerging as one car pitted, the other took over the lead. And so, as in came the Manthey Racing 911 GT3R, so the 84 Mercedes took over the race lead. The way the pit stops would pan out, the Mercedes was looking the stronger car, as Andre Lotterer had the brake pads and discs changed, rejoined and properly spun. He should have been able to get going quickly, but the car, in contrast, kangarooed its way into life before electrically it was all reset and it was able to get going again. At ProSpeed, Xavier Marson was getting ready for his next stint. The 53 Ferrari had an engine problem and dropped back, and another set of Pirellis went on to another car. Through the pit lane came the 84 Mercedes. As back ahead of it once again went the Manthey Porsche, the two continuing to trade places right the way around the race. But eventually, Bernd Schneider made his move for the race lead. He didn't wait for the Porsche to pit. He went round the outside and did something his two teammates hadn't been able to do, past the Porsche. Louis Machiels had this big accident going into Eau Rouge, a tyre going down as he turned into the corner. Louis was okay, but the car out of the race with a lot of damage. As he limped away, the safety car was deployed once more. And by being held at the end of the pit lane, so the Manthey Porsche went a lap down, and that coupled with the down on power engine and occasional loss of performance from cylinders meant that it was never able to really come back into the game. It did unlap itself, but did so before that white line. You can just see marked across the road the safety car line. You can't overtake before it, but that is what Patrick Pilet did, and they got a drive-through penalty for their pains. Enzo Ide charged Ian Dockrell off the road. A wrecked Audi, a wrecked Ferrari, and it meant that those two cars not only were out of the race, but also it brought out the safety car once again. People bunched up. Wim Mulder's Porsche was dispensed with by the JRM Nissan. That bashed its way into the tyres but was able to rejoin. Bob Neville bit his nails as he hoped that his Nissan would get to the end. Christopher Meet went round the outside of Frank Keckler to pick up fourth place, Audi ahead of BMW. Disappointed faces in the Vita 4-1 camp. They've been more disappointed in the last hour and a half as the car ground to a halt in the pit lane. Greg Franchi watching on, but not at all happy. The car would go no further. Michael Bartels commiserated with the team, but also a smoky, indeed flammable Ferrari came in. Kessel Racing, championship leaders coming into the event, saw the car go up in flames. That was the end of the race for number 44. It gave Audi a podium finish because Andre Lotterer would bring number 2 to third place, and within the last hour, Bernd Schneider, with a full tank of fuel, hopped on board the leading Mercedes to bring it home for his second Spa 24-hour win. The mechanics could congratulate one another on jobs well done, and they started to get themselves ready for the celebrations. Out of the bus stop, up to the line, victory in the total 24 hours of Spa to Bernd Schneider, Maximilian Buch and Maximilian Goetz at the end of an impeccable performance from the drivers, from the team, from the car. Everything absolutely spot on for the HTP Motorsport team. Congratulations all round, and Bernd Schneider standing on top of the car. The drivers made their way up towards the podium, and it has been another superb race in the total 24 hours of Spa's history. From all of us at Spa, we hope you've enjoyed the coverage. Join us at the Nürburgring for the final round of the championship. For now, it's time for a Belgian beer, and goodbye.